When did it start to click for you where you're like, oh, this shit is nothing like what I thought? People don't understand how this really works.
The entirety of the system. People at the very top, they don't want transparency. Look at the meltdown on the part of the JFK stuff being declassified half a century later. If you're going to do that about this, how can I believe anything that you say?
Did you go through those docs?
Some of them, yes.
What'd you think?
Story after story, they refuse to publish documents that they're in possession of. The one would be the Mangione Manifesto. Clearly, huge public interest in it. And again, it's just, no, we can't talk about this. You see this all the time. In the case of Epstein, there was something extraordinary in the Justice Department review that the Trump administration did that hardly got any attention, which was that he had 1,000 victims. What had been alleged by prosecutors before that was like 24 or so. And I'm like, wait a second, that's a big jump. So how much they get away with? I want to see what can I know about it. So I would say the most dystopian thing I saw was that
Hey guys, if you're not subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button on the video. And if you don't have time to watch this episode right now, no problem, but I'd really appreciate it if you would save it to your watch later playlist. Finally, if you'd like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below. Thank you.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you got to be a self-starter, which I am, and I'm assume you are, because I see other people. Do you have this experience? They go, what do I do? It's like, what do you mean? You can do whatever you want. And that's the beauty of it. And they're just like, tell me what to do.
We're living in the best time ever for that too, because like, and you're honestly like one of the first guys in a lot of ways. You're a part of that first generation, I should say, that came up where it's like, yo, social media is established here. And now this is where people can actually then use that as an outlet to get news reporting out and actually cover the stories. And you don't have to have your credential from the Washington Post to go to places and pick shit up. You can use the tools in front of you.
Exactly. People are so black-pilled, the people that are critical of media, and that's something I don't agree with them about. Obviously, I hate the Times and everything else too, but like, there's so much possibility now. People are way too pessimistic, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, when you say pessimistic, are you saying pessimistic about its future because of what, I guess the institution has done to itself, or they're pessimistic about the fact that, the resource war has kind of been lost because these places that used to have the access now don't have the ivory tower around them?
No, just the idea that there's nothing you can do about the New York Times' dominance, and they have all this access and they have all this control and they set the agenda. There's nothing we can do about it. It's like, set the agenda. Look at their posts. You could go on TikTok and find something that's just burying them in numbers. And that could easily be political content or newsworthy content. It's just that people haven't done it, in my view.
Now, did you always want to be a journalist when you were growing up?
No, and I would have been mortified if you had told me as a kid that I'm going to end up being a journalist, because I just saw the ones on TV and I was like, oh, those boring guys in suits that don't really say anything. That seems like a horrifying life. I didn't realize there was like different kinds, or you could make your own kind.
So you went from wanting to be a firefighter to journalist at some point.
I'm trying to think. I probably wanted to be something really impractical, like a novelist, like when I was a kid, just like a fiction writer. Because I was just creative. I just read stuff and it was like, whoa, words can like shape how people think about things, how they perceive the world, and you can change things based on it, just based on what we're reading in school or whatever. And I grew up and I did actually do some fiction early on, and I realized, and it just felt a little self-indulgent because just all this awful stuff going on. So I thought, okay, I'm already writing. What can I do more pertinent to what I see as like the horrible political situation?
What years are we talking?
I graduated 2010. It was the middle of like the free fall of the economy.
Right.
And I had the economics professors who had all these very glib answers for everything suddenly be like, I don't know what's happening. And I'm just like, the elites seem pretty discredited at this point. Maybe we should do something about getting a new leadership.
So that would have been right at like the burgeoning of like the Occupy Wall Street movement and Tea Party movement.
It's interesting you put that together, because that was exactly what I fed into when I started seeing this stuff. And I'd always perceived that, like, things are unfair, obviously. If you don't think that, I don't have much hope for you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And everyone, most everyone does outside of Washington, think that it's unfair. So I saw that and I thought, well, what can, I like writing. What can I do relevant to that? And journalism seemed like the obvious thing. Oh yeah, and then Snowden came out, Glenn Greenwald, who I'm friends with now, reporting on it, and just seeing the effect that putting out primary source documents can have, because no one can ignore it at that point. If you look at the reporting at the time, people knew about the NSA programs and stuff. You could piece this together if you read carefully enough, but they didn't have that primary source documentation to just shove it in their face and be like, look at these things that
Wait, they knew about it though?
Yeah. I mean, they had whistleblowers like Bill Binney and Thomas Drake come out prior to it. And you could, if you read very carefully, like Inspector General's reports, things like that, you could kind of get a sense, but it wasn't it wasn't all laid out for people to just
Meaning
look
they
at.
didn't know like the existence of the heartbeat thing, or that
Exactly.
Snowden actually was able to put a name on.
Yeah, I mean in broad strokes, they know about technology changing, so
Yeah.
there being some kind of a mass collection system.
It's very interesting to me that a lot of that stuff came in the wake of the financial crisis, because I do believe everything is downstream from economics. It's just, if you look at human history, that seems to be what it is. But, you know, we had this crazy 2000 to 2010 period that kind of kicks off with 9/11, culminates with the financial crisis, and then the ashes that form of that, you get the people like Snowden coming out saying, hey, all this shit that you thought was like kumbaya coming together, even that was like the good stuff of the early 2000s, it was actually bullshit. It was anti-constitutional, totalitarian. Your favorite politicians were all a part of it. It was this giant cover-up. And now you kick that off, and it's not like you could see this coming, but then that opens up the door for like the outsider, like Trump, to come in, and these movements to start that I think totally, I mean, I don't think everyone knows it, changed everything about our country politically.
Yeah, Snowden's my exact same age. I was just looking this up recently. I read his memoir, and I was struck by how much he looked at the system just sort of collapsing around him, the post 9/11 system, where basically we took the entirety of our economic system and reoriented it towards national security, and haven't gone back, by the way, even though Al-Qaeda is no longer the focus that it was. ISIS is no longer the focus that it once was. And I had roughly the same reaction. I mean, I wasn't in the intelligence community, so I couldn't have the reaction that Snowden had, but I was like, man, I should probably do something about this. And that's how I got into journalism.
Now, how did you, like at the very beginning, you were totally independent, like doing things on your own? What were you doing? Like,
yeah, I remember
releasing
my
articles on Facebook?
first story. I read about FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, the idea that you could request basically any government document, and, you know, pursuant to a number of exemptions and things and games that they play, you can, at least in principle, get back records. I thought that was the coolest thing. And it's something that's unique in a lot of ways to the United States. Not that there aren't other open record statutes in other countries, but it's the most kind of like radical in the U.S. legally, and so in how it's implemented. And so I remember the torture report had just come out detailing the Bush administration's legal justification for torture, or enhanced interrogation, as they would call it. And
Nice fancy name.
yeah. I filed that FOIA and I remember the attorney that was responsible for it, John Yu was his name. I remember, he was a professor at Cal Berkeley, because I had a friend that went to Berkeley and mentioned that at some point. And I thought, that's a public institution. I could probably FOIA that. So I sent a FOIA request to his office email and found out that he was dodging interviews from media. He didn't want to go on and defend his own program at the time.
Oh, you could FOIA that because they received funding from the government.
Exactly.
Whoa.
And that was like my first thing. And then once I got that, I was like, it's on. I want to do more of this.
So wait, you email the guy, he had been ducking all these interviews, and then you're like, hey, you are supposed to follow the FOIA laws, so give me this information.
Basically. So you FOIA the, it's like a records custodian at the institution. You can just ask for anyone, because it's like, you know, it's a .edu associated with a public institution. And so I got I think it was his secretary's messages. No, it was his messages personally. He was like, yeah, I'd rather not do that interview. It was like CNN or something like that. I just thought that was funny. It's like, dude, you're not going to defend your signature program here? Like, what gives? And so I put that out, and that no one cared that I was a nobody then, because the document was there and they could go and look at it and read the email and be like, yeah, why is this guy dodging this stuff?
Did you put that out like on Twitter or something?
Yeah, I just I did a story on it because for some small blog, but I tweeted it and that's how people saw it. Yeah.
So how were you making money? Like you'd go to some of these blogs and say, I got a story, just pay me per story kind of deal?
Yeah, it was all extremely like ad hoc. I would just be like, hey, check this out. Like, don't you want this? And I found that, you know, I didn't have any connections. You know, I'm not exactly a social butterfly, so I wasn't at the parties that a lot of other reporters are to make these connections. But what I realized was none of that mattered if you had the goods and you have something and the editor sees it and it's a primary source document that there's no question about its veracity. They get excited about that, and I get excited about it too. So that was sort of the beginning.
Yeah, you were telling me off camera right before, and we didn't go into detail, how nowadays, like especially with how old school journalism school is, it hasn't changed in a lot of ways over the past decades. Like, they're teaching a lot of bad habits there, in your opinion, whereas you had to teach yourself and come out and make yourself a journalist, and you think that helped you do your job a lot better. Why do you say that? What's the juxtaposition there?
Oh, totally. I have so many younger reporters coming to me for advice, people that are in journalism school or recently graduated. When I see what they were taught, I see a system that's almost like one of those mosquitoes in like Jurassic Park, just like frozen in amber from like a trillion years ago. It's kind of like, you can see how this advice would have been useful like pre-internet or even the beginning of the internet, but how just inadequate it is to the times. And so my just jerry-rigging my system to figure out how to find things wasn't informed by any of these sort of, it's like when they teach you in school the scientific method. And you talk to an actual scientist, none of it works that way.
Right.
You know, like you're not going through these 4 steps or whatever. You more use common sense. And so that's what I use as a process to find these things. You'll find I get so many reporters in my DMs asking me for help with FOIA. And, I always try to oblige, but it's like, they don't teach this stuff. Like that's an important skill to be able to understand. And what they do teach is kind of the equivalent of the scientific method, but for journalism, the journalism method. And it's like, again, that was something that might have been more pertinent before. And even then, I still don't think it would have been very useful because everything's moving so fast. Things are changing so quickly. The way that people communicate, the way that readers consume information, the places that information lives. I mean, if you look at the intelligence community, they're having to update how they collect things. They just released an open source intelligence strategy for the first time ever, I think last year. And it details, it's basically, they've got to collect information from all of the different social media buckets that exist and that didn't exist 3 years ago. I mean, there's Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It goes on and on. So they're responding to it fairly quickly. And on the other hand, the media is like completely out to lunch. And it's a shame because the national security state is running circles around the media because they can't keep up with them in this respect.
Have you ever read 2 articles from the same event and felt like they were from completely different planets? With today's fragmented media landscape, it's getting harder to know what's real, what's biased, and what's just noise. That's where ground news comes in. I started using ground news a couple years ago because I wanted more transparency in my news consumption. They don't eliminate bias, they just help you see it. Ground news brings together reporting from across the entire political spectrum so you can actually compare headlines and coverage. It's an antidote to information overload, sensationalism, and algorithm-driven echo chambers. Using ground news, you're going to get to see how many sources are covering a story, how differently it's being framed, and which side of the spectrum may be ignoring it altogether. And that's where their blind spot feature comes in. This is where you're going to see the stories that one side of the aisle isn't seeing. You'll see bias ratings, factuality scores, and even ownership information, where you can find out who funds the outlets reporting the story. I was looking through ground news the other day on the Putin-Trump summit up in Alaska, and it was amazing how much different the headlines of the same exact event were and what the breakdowns were. But this is what ground news allows you to see, how the same videos and images can be manipulated to drive political narratives. So go to ground.news/Julian for a better way to stay informed. You can subscribe now to get 40% off the Vantage plan by using this QR code on my screen. And you can also use my link down in the description below, ground.news/Julian. Once again, get 40% off the Vantage plan by using this QR code or my link down below. Something really changed, though, in the sense that obviously everyone has, everyone's a human being. You're going to have your natural biases. There are things that in some ways can't be controlled. But we used to live in a world where you could at least just get the information. And it's more of a golden era kind of thing where there were 3 channels and, newspapers, and that's kind of it. So the downside is that means there is some protection around what can actually go out. Now it's a free-for-all.
Right.
But with that free-for-all, we've seen a lot of people double down on, saying, well, because I have this position, this credential, therefore my opinion matters more. And they let their personal opinions leak into their reporting all the time. How do you avoid that? Because you're still a human being. Like, you have your personal opinions, especially when you're covering, controversial political issues and stuff like that.
Yeah, as I've gotten older, I realize that my opinions don't really matter. I almost don't care what I think about something. I want to see what can I know about it. And obviously, what I go around and look for is going to be informed by what I think. But I've had so many stories where I expect it to go this direction, and it goes in a completely other one, that I'm just kind of learned to be agnostic when you go about something. You can see that something's important, but you might not understand how it's important or where the story is going to take you. So you really just have to have fidelity to where the facts lead you, which sounds simple, but sometimes they lead you in uncomfortable directions. I mean, I did a story recently about, Pete Hegseth and the firing of all of these senior staffers. And, I started interviewing former military people, legal experts on chain of command. And what I realized was whatever you think about Hegseth, and I've been quite critical of him in the past, he's the civilian elected leadership, and to the extent that he's disempowered with all these firings and removals, that empowers the brass, the unelected military brass, and that's not a great thing. You want to have strong civilian leadership, even if you don't agree with him. And so that was a point I made in the story, and then certain people responded saying, "Oh, you're pro Pete Hegseth or whatever." It's like, no, I'm talking about civilian leadership of the armed forces, which is a separate issue. I could kind of see how they would get confused about it. But again, following those facts, it sometimes takes you places, A, you don't expect, and B, people don't want to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've seen over the past several years, just observing you on Twitter, you have a very entertaining Twitter, by the way. Observing you on there, you piss everyone off,
yes,
which I like. That means you are landing on things and at least trying to pursue where the truth may be. It's when people are constantly retweeted and I guess like glorified by one side of the political spectrum and they're reporting on stuff. I'm like, well, they're probably a commentator, not a journalist, so I can imagine that's got to be a tough spot to be because you're also, you gotta sell subscriptions to your Substack. You got to make a living and things like that. And the reality is the easy way to do it would just be to pick a side and go 10,000 miles an hour into it. And you don't do that. And I think that's commendable.
Thank you. Yeah, it's hard because the way these ideological niches are really rewarded, where you're consistently serving up the same type of ideas and people can know what to expect, and it's almost like baby food where it's pre-chewed up and you don't even have to, your body will digest it easily because there's not going to be this foreign antibody in it that's like, whoa, what was this idea? But I made a decision when I started this thing and I left the mainstream outlets that, I came up during kind of in the middle of my career. That
we'll come back to that.
Yeah. Okay. That's not ultimately what I want to do, because even though the money's easier and even though, life is more stable, serving the same thing forever is a really boring life, completely aside from the moral questions.
Serving the same thing forever.
Yeah. Just saying the same ideological thing for a certain type of group and what they want to hear. You know what I mean? That's definitely a more stable life. But it's just so boring and, completely aside from it being wrong. And that's not the point of getting it. What I understand about media is if you want to make money, you go into finance. You don't go into media. You go into media because of, you're pissed off about something, or I hope that's why I did. And so it's like, well, if I'm just serving up the same plate every day, irrespective of what the truth is, then why did I get into this thing?
Right.
So that's sort of my reasoning.
Yeah. So you were completely on your own, starting this off, kind of getting your way, figuring it out, and then I believe the first place you were was the Young Turks, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So that's more.
No, a place called Reader Supported News.
I don't know what that
Very
is.
obscure, small website.
How'd you end up there?
I'm trying to remember. I was doing the freelance stuff that I was telling you about, and he noticed one of those things, one of these FOIA dispatches that I had, and he's like, "I like that guy." He's a very pushy. He's like, "You're on the team, yeah."
So you end up there. How long were you there?
I think 2 or 3 years.
Oh, wow. So not for 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when did you end up with Young Turks?
So that would have been, immediately after that. And that was a YouTube channel. And again, these are very weird. And I wouldn't say the Young Turks is obscure, but it's not
it's not NBC.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And in retrospect, that was really beneficial because, again, they gave me a lot of space to define what my job was going to be, because I was going to be the bloodhound investigator guy. And I don't really have the on-screen riz, and it's just kind of how I am. So they were like, all right, well, he can do something else. And I just did what I have always done, and it worked really well because a lot of people on social media, they tend to be really good communicators, but they don't always do the investigations,
Yeah, no, it's so fascinating to me to look at this because it feels like some things feel like it was 30 years ago and 3 months ago at the same time.
Yeah.
But when you look at how strange the spectrum is now with, left and right agreeing on certain issues and then completely disagreeing on other issues, you kind of look at what Jank and all the guys at Young Turks were. You could run tape of them in 2016, 2017, 2018, kind of when you were there, and the people that would instantly be making a reaction video saying these people are now some of the same people who on certain things are like, they make a good point. And it's so weird to look at because it's almost like, at least the first term with Trump, you kind of had you knew who was in what bucket or whatever. But now everyone's a goddamn expert on so many different buckets that it's like everything feels foggy out there. So did you see any of that happening back then, or is this more of a phenomenon of like what kind of came out of the Biden administration?
Well, I think what happened during the first Trump administration was there was a denialism on the part of kind of elite media about that he was even elected, because there was this whole, you can go look me up, I didn't touch any of the Russiagate stuff. Not because I didn't think that there wasn't, no, not one, because I didn't think that it was going to end up showing what a lot of the commentators and media outlets were saying it was, which the general thrust of it was the election was somehow illegitimate because of what happened. I don't deny for a second that the Russians were involved in information operations, hacks, things like that. Completely agree with all of that. Where I didn't think was reasonable to go was to take that and say, oh, therefore the Russians stole the election.
Right. It had
I don't think
effect.
that's true. Yeah. And
So
so for that reason,
you thought that early.
yeah, totally. I mean, again, never denied that they hacked these files, that they wanted to have an effect. But what I understand about the information landscape, and I think really anybody who's spends a lot of time on social media, is you couldn't control something if you wanted to. It's just a free for all, and you can try, and you can see corporations on there all the time trying to manipulate the direction in which things go, and like having modest success. And I'm not saying that that they can't exercise some sort of influence over what's happening, but to swing an election determinatively. I mean, I lived in Wisconsin at the time, and I knew people all over that were going to vote for him, and I wasn't surprised when he won. And then I have my friends in places where there maybe isn't that ideological variegation that were shocked and
What the
yeah, totally. And I get that response, but it was like I wasn't surprised in the sense of that people were going to vote that way, because I saw and lived around those people. That's one of the problems with media, I think, is it's so concentrated in D.C.,
coastal,
Los Angeles. Yes, exactly. Not even just coastal, but like New York and D.C. in particular.
I agree. And look, I'm from Jersey. I've been in this area my whole life, right? Like, I don't know. There's a limitation to what I can know about the Iowa farmer and everything. But if you just like reached outside your box a little bit as an outsider,
even just recognizing that you don't know something, that's such a big advantage.
Yeah, I mean, you could see it. You could see where that was coming from. And I've always said this. It's like, the two candidates who really made the dent in 2016, and probably should have been the two candidates that were running against each other, were Bernie and Trump, right? And so Bernie got railroaded. We know that whole story. But like, yes, they had very different solutions politically. They were very different on a lot of things. But when they were sticking their fingers on the pulse of the problem, they were both right there, and they understood people. And to me, they were the manifestation of the Occupy Wall Street movement and the Tea Party movement. And it's like, in some ways, yes, it's shocking to see like, the funny Brooklyn dude, going like this and telling everyone that they're going to get their jobs back, or, the crazy billionaire guy from The Apprentice as the manifestation. But the fact that if you just read their messages or listen to what they were saying, the fact that surprised people in DC and New York, I'm still to this day, I'm like, how did that I know you don't live in those areas and everything, but how does that shock you? Don't you have internal polling? Couldn't you see this 5 years ago?
Right. It speaks to the information echo chamber that they live in, which is really frightening. I mean, I spent a number of years in Washington before moving back to Wisconsin, and something I was struck by repeatedly was how much these guys really believe out-of-touch stuff. And they don't like. I remember one time during 2024, my wife and I went to a bar with some political world friends that work in Capitol Hill, and one of them said, "Oh, there's no way that Trump." Nice guy who's like, I would think of as more in touch with things than most people in Washington. He says, "Oh, Trump. There's no way Trump's going to win." And then my wife was really surprised. I was surprised. We said, "Well, why is that?" He says, "Well, he's facing an indictment. Nobody's going to want to vote for a felon." and my wife is just like, you could see her turn her face like. And I'm just like, I don't know about that.
You know what? The really sad thing was they made him relatable.
Totally.
They're like,
they made him the underdog.
Yeah.
After he'd already been president.
Took the words out of my mouth. It's like, I always said this. January 6th obviously has a lot of things that have been relitigated since then, and issues, I think, with the investigations and what they did to some people. But like, the day was a bad look. Like, he should have known like some shit could go down that day. There's a lot of people in that town that don't like him. Like, that part I never felt bad for him about, because I'm like, dude, what were you doing? Like, just figure this out later. You can come back in 4 years and try to run again. But anyway, that happens. All they had to do, in my opinion, was just step back like this.
Totally.
Just like ease out and be like, just go like this. And then starting on January 8th, 2021, first they cancel him off the internet. Then they decide to bring all these weird charges against him that make no sense. Then, you know, they indict him in state court. That makes no sense. Then, you know, they find him guilty. They make him a convicted felon. And people are like, yo, he's doing the same shit he does to some of us on Main Street. They're doing the same shit to him. And then the guy almost gets killed. And people are like, yo, it's like this arc happened.
It's like on the CDs with the explicit lyrics thing.
Yeah.
That's what they slapped on them. And everybody's like, whoa, who's this guy that I'm supposed to listen to? You know what I mean? Yeah. He got banned. You're not allowed to listen to him. Anybody who's been a kid knows, don't tell kids don't listen to this thing, because they're going to go and listen to that thing.
When I saw people on Black Twitter being like, yo, this is the first black president, I was like, oh, it's a wrap. Like, this guy's going to win.
I love the edits of his mugshot.
Oh,
like it's
dude,
an album cover. Yeah.
It was incredible. And then like they have him like walking out normally, and they slow-mo it into like Many Men, and it's like, this is the fault of those people in DC and New York.
Served
they
it up
did
on a
this.
platter, yeah.
Yes, you know? But like, what do you were living through reporting in the 4 years when Biden was there, and it's like, it was very obvious that he was not
totally
all there and everything. How do you, as a journalist, deal with, you know, looking at the obvious here and apparently having half the country that just doesn't want to see it?
Yeah, that was something that I wrote about early on and got a lot of angry reactions, which I expected. But it's interesting to me that the people that hid it from a partisan, like if you look at this from a partisan perspective, the people that hid it actually didn't do the Democrats any favors at all, because they ended up foreclosing on any possibility of a serious primary and caused them to lose. And those are feeded as like, oh, they're the, you know, Democrat favorites. Like, everybody loves these guys. It's like, what they forced you to lose, you know?
Right.
So anyways, I try to talk about this stuff. And something that's frustrating in reporting is if you sound like something someone else is saying, people will tend to be like, oh, you're questioning his cognitive fitness. Didn't I see Fox News do that? So you must be a right winger. And they do that thing. And it's just like, isn't there a way you can just express something without it getting jammed into this one side or other sort of thing?
Yeah. And I think one thing that amplifies that, and this is on every issue in every direction, it's not one way or the other, you will see massive bot campaigns make sure that things are simplified down into one bucket. Like Ken Klippenstein equals Fox News tomorrow. Ken Klippenstein equals CNN, if you're getting enough clicks on whatever it is you're reporting. But that's crazy, because there was like this massive shift that happened where suddenly like some of the elite donors, in this case on the left side, were like, oh yeah, no, turns out he is gone in summer of 2024.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. All of Washington discovered it the day after the debate, after the rest of us had seen how many clips of this guy, you know, wandering around and just listen to him speak. He couldn't get a sentence out. This was common sense stuff. Yeah.
You know.
And then I couldn't believe the amount of just straight up gaslighting, because you would play a clip from him from the Obama, when he was vice president on Obama, completely. And the cynicism of invoking the stutter, when you could do clips of him from just 10 years ago, and he didn't have any. There was nothing.
None of it. Yeah. I caddied at Wilmington Country Club for years. And apologies to people who've heard the story on the podcast a ton. But, you know, he's a member there. So when he was vice president, sometimes he would come back and play. And I remember summer 2014 was the last time I was near him. I never caddied for him, never got to talk to him or anything. But it was a Saturday, and when I was coming out of the caddy shack, I could see all the Secret Service carts. So I'm like, okay, he's here. And so I get down to the practice tee, which is like this long practice tee. And then, you know, I'm behind the guy I'm caddying for. And then suddenly, you know, you can hear him coming up. And he's like, hey, Jim, how's your ass? Hey, Bill. Like, he's busting balls, whatever. The guy was like 70 years old or 71 years old. He gets right up to the tee, fucking stripes at 245, stripes at 250. Hey, Bill, what's happening? Stripes it. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, you know, I was like kind of yoked a little bit. I was like, oh, wow. this guy's like kind of old. Maybe he'll run for president. And then I remember it wasn't even a full that was like July or August 2014. It wasn't even a full 5 years later when he announced he was running in, I think, March 2019 in Philly. And I heard him talk, and I'm like, he had to have like a brain aneurysm or something. I'm like, that's a totally different person.
Yeah, and he's had health issues. What was interesting was the way in which the media tried to retcon after the debate. They were like, oh, and that was the day we all discovered, because there was no way to know before. And if you look at the polling, the majority of the Democrats in their own party didn't want him to run for re-election,
Right.
going back a year at least. So this had been known. And there's just this whole false history now that the elites tried to ram down everyone's throat of that, oh, it's not that we were either asleep at the wheel or actively hiding it. It's that nobody knew about it until the debate. And that's what happened. And it's just this false history that they've tried to, because that's not what the polling had consistently showed before that.
Now, I'm a little bit of a cynic, to be honest with you, about this stuff. Like, I'm not sure any president ever fully runs the country, because there's a lot of machinery that happens behind them that they're not read in on, because people can control that information and they were there before they got there and everything. It was just on another level with Biden because of his cognition, kind of reminiscent of like Reagan in his second term, I guess if you will. But like, do you think that, looking back on it, it was as simple as the people that were appointed to unelected jobs around him are the people who ran the country? Or do you think it was like the bureaucracy running it? I don't know if you want to go this broad, but like the Pentagon was running the country or something like that. Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, if you want to talk about national security state bureaucracy, I think that they run things to a greater degree than most people would like to accept in general. And I find that really disturbing. I mean, even just the examples we were talking about, the Russia investigation, the response to January 6th, the national security state just kind of kicks in and goes into this sort of autopilot mode where they start running things to an extent that I don't want to say that the president couldn't do something about it, but realistically, like you're saying, the president is one person. How much is he going to be able to oversee? And when the national security state has perfected this sort of passive-aggressive system of slow-rolling decisions they don't want to do, of putting the president in difficult positions. So like when the president goes to, say, decide some sort of kinetic response to Iran, he can't just say, I want this. They have to have a menu of options that he can pick from, several, 2 or 3 different ones. So one thing that they like to do is they'll say, okay, here's the extreme one, here's the middle one, here's the lower tier one. And then they know that he'll probably pick the middle one. That's just one random example.
Is it a McDonald's menu for Trump? Is that how they do it?
And so they're so good at kind of foreclosing on the options that the president has to begin with, to kind of, I don't want to say that they have total control, because that's not true, and the president has a responsibility to stand up to that. But yeah, they've perfected these methods. I mean, and then we end up in countries for decades and decades and things that nobody wants, but the president isn't able to disentangle himself from. So that's sort of a long-winded answer, but yes, I think the bureaucracy is very powerful and something that doesn't get attention in the media because everything is so celebrity obsessed. Yeah. What did Trump say? What did Melania say? Yep. What did the vice president say? You see almost no reporting about these massive institutions that represent the majority of government.
Whether you're deep in the weeds on political rabbit holes or pulling threads on another wild conspiracy theory, your brain might be racing by the time you hit the pillow. But your mattress? That shouldn't be a part of the problem. Ghost Bed is here to help you rest easier. Their Luxe mattress is the most popular model for a reason. It's built with patented cooling technology that helps regulate your body temperature all night long. Whether you're naturally a hot sleeper or just dealing with brutal summer nights, the Luxe can make a huge difference. Every Ghost Bed mattress is competitively priced. They go up to 50% less than comparable mattresses out there. So you're getting premium comfort without luxury markup. Each one also features their exclusive ProCore layer, which reinforces support through your hips and back to help reduce aches and pain. And with over 60,000 five-star reviews, Ghost Bed has earned a serious reputation for helping people sleep better. Still not sure which model is right for you? Head to ghostbed.com/Julian and take their quick mattress quiz. You'll get a personalized recommendation based on your sleeping style and preferences. And right now, my listeners and first-time Ghost Bed customers are going to get an extra 25% off, even on top of current deals. Just head to the link down in my description and use code Julian at checkout. Once again, that's ghostbed.com/Julian, link in the description below, and use promo code Julian. Upgrade your sleep with Ghost Bed. makers of the coolest beds in the world. Yeah, there's a great story this guy Stephen Kinzer told on my buddy Danny Jones's podcast. It's like 4 or 5 years ago. So Stephen Kinzer was a longtime journalist at New York Times, was a bureau chief in a lot of different places. He's one of the guys, I think, who was like breaking the MK Ultra story, or like who really dug into that. But he was talking to Danny about after Carter left office. He had known Jimmy Carter a little bit. He happened to be the bureau chief, maybe down in like South America as a whole for New York Times. So maybe a year after Carter left office, something like that, he was coming down for a visit. So I think his name's Stephen Kinzer. Can we check that, Joe? Stephen Kinzer, Danny Jones. It would have been like 4 or 5 years ago. I just want to make sure I'm getting it right. But, you know, he hits up, I guess he hits up like through an emissary or whatever, hits up Carter and says, hey, you know, let's get a drink. So gets a drink with Jimmy Carter. And they're sitting there talking, and after a while, it is? Okay. So after a while, he's like, all right, you know, fuck it. Let me ask him. It's been a year. I'll ask him about this. So he's like, you know, what's it like becoming president? And Jimmy Carter's like, oh my God, dude, it's fucking insane, yada, yada, yada. He's like, well, what'd you do, like, when you first got in there? What's your first order of business to, like, learn how to do this job that's impossible? And he goes, well, I called every living president and invited them in separately for a meeting to get advice. And so Kinzer's like, all right, fuck it, I'm going to ask him. Who gave the best advice? And Carter smiled and said Nixon. And Kinzer's like, all right, why'd Nixon give the best advice? And he goes, well, you know, he walked in there and he said, all this shit that they fight about, the domestic stuff, the healthcare, the fucking taxes, it's 5% one direction or another. Congress controls it. You can't do shit about it. It's all bullshit. The foreign policy, though, that's what they don't see, and that's where you got the power. And I think about that all the time because it gets truer and truer every time I notice something. Like, presidents can do something with a pen behind closed doors with the Pentagon or some of these Joint Chiefs of Staff and stuff, and, you know, a little drone strike here in Yemen, and people are like, where the fuck is Yemen? You know? And then they don't realize the reverberations of what something like that means, and then it affects them at home in a way they can't see 10 years later.
They are so good at, okay, so the debate now about the military in Mexico. Look at how it's discussed. They say there will be no invasion, there will be no military invasion, but so that's about Title 10, like formal military authority. That doesn't
Title 10?
Yeah, so that's like the legal code for like formal, you know, like internationally recognized combatants. What that doesn't cover is intelligence operations, special operations. And so you see this all the time when they say there are no boots in Ukraine. What that doesn't cover is JSOC units, is people seconded to the CIA, which we have in there in fairly significant number. And we have in, I'm sure, going in and out of Mexico too. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like for intelligence collection at the very least. So when they say no military, they're saying no Marines, like regular guys. Like, yeah, of course they're not going to do that.
Take the uniform
you know?
off.
Yeah, exactly. Just put them under the CIA, put them in a task force, and suddenly they're not boots on the ground anymore.
It's like with Ukraine, you know, there's a dude landing like a fucking C-130 or whatever it is right now, walking off the back with a bunch of small bills cash, or large bills cash, I should say, handing in a bag, and
oh yeah,
that's what
SEALs,
it's a proxy
Delta,
war.
Targeting support. I mean, they're maybe not shooting at them, but everything short of that, for sure.
It's so strange how the world that we live in is really just about semantics.
Totally. Everything is so postmodern now. You can't just say what it is anymore because it's this whole legal game of, oh, actually, technically, that's not pursuant to, you know, Rule 5734. It doesn't count as this. It's like, okay, well, but the basic picture that ordinary people hear when they say no invasion, they think that means nothing. They're not thinking this legal stuff that the administration is doing.
When did this click for you? Like, when, you know, you're a green kid coming out at first, like making whatever stories you can go and like covering something, obviously enjoying it. And it seems like you really do enjoy your job now too, which is great, but you know a lot more. So when did it start to click for you? Was there like one story or one moment along the way besides Snowden where you're like, oh, this shit is nothing like what I thought. People don't understand how this really works.
I mean, there was no one moment, but if I had to point to like an inflection point, it'd be my editor, who himself is a veteran of a lot of these newsrooms. He used to be Seymour Hersh's researcher for a number of years.
Oh, wow.
He worked at the Times, the LA Times, I mean, everywhere. This guy was like, he reported, his big scandal was he reported on the nuclear facilities I think NATO had in Europe during the Reagan administration, and they tried to prosecute him for it.
I don't
so
know
he's
anything.
Like an old hand.
What happened?
Here's
I don't know
the interesting thing.
that.
Yeah, so he doesn't promote himself at all. He's just like loves the reporting.
Who is this guy?
William Arkin. That's my editor here. And so he had a lot of experience that I did, and crucially had an insight into pre 9/11. And so he could tell me stuff that is like unique to this time. I don't know if you ever had the experience where it's like pre-internet time. I'm barely old enough to just foggily remember it.
Right.
But if you talk to people, it's like, oh yeah, people used to be way more in touch, and it's kind of like I'm trying to imagine that, and I can't really, And so having somebody who's seen the administrations come and go, who's seen the approaches change over time, has helped so much to inform. That's another big loss that you see in journalism is as the revenues have dwindled. For reasons I think are largely the fault of media. I'm not defending them.
Yep.
But part of that is that it just becomes this kind of pit stop career where people will do it for a few years when they're young, and then they go on to become, crisis affairs response for some big corporation or something. It's lost a lot of that experience that would tell somebody, hey, all this post 9/11 shit is bad because it used to be this, and I don't even have a concept of really what it was before that beyond what I can read. So to hear someone and have somebody that has that perspective is really beneficial.
Yeah, that guy's he's lived through the wars. That's cool to have that.
He was the first to report the above top secret plans to invade Iraq, and it was codenamed Polo Step, and it launched biggest. This was it would have been 2002. And it launched the biggest leak investigation, I think, in U.S. history at Rumsfeld's behest. So this guy has like huge stuff. And here's the thing: he doesn't ever promote himself because he doesn't care.
That's great, obviously. So he's in it for the love of the game. I love that. That's great. But like, you have that pulled up already, Joe? It looks like he's got it. Maybe we can see it over here.
Yep.
This is what you're talking about? Top secret.
He was the one that
Polo
reported that. Yep. Above top
No
secret. I think it was a
shit.
special access program, if I remember right.
So do you remember what happened here? I mean, I can try to read some of it, but
Yeah. So basically, the Bush administration was not being honest about what was going to happen, and he
They
being
weren't?
yeah.
no way.
And so he was actually able to, get the actual name of the program, and they had created a special compartment for planning this thing, and kept it fairly small. And I think he wrote about it for the LA Times at the time. So he broke that, and it's just like it just goes to show the fact that the rest of the media didn't report that. I mean, he himself was former military intelligence, has a lot of perspective from both inside and outside that informs what he does. And crucially, he's critical of these institutions in a way that I think a lot of press likes to think they're critical, but since they rely on them for sourcing so much, you have a audience capture of the sort that's kind of similar to social media, where people end up having to say things that they know their audience wants to hear. In that same fashion, the media has to not say things that their sources don't necessarily want to hear because they don't want to lose their sources. And he's always been willing to burn bridges.
Well, that's a huge point right there. And I know you've run into this before. It's like, the access journalism becomes a drug because people are like, oh my God, it took fucking 6 years to develop this amazing source at, government place X. And if I do this story, I'm going to lose them forever and lose access to the fucking 10 people that they connected me to. And so it's easy for me to sit at home and be like, well, of course you should just report the story as is. And then I remember, I'm like, well, these are people too. They got, kids to send to college and whatever.
And they will explicitly say that in like candid conversation, I mean, this is their livelihood. If you've, you really sleep in the bed that you make for yourself. And if you are this access person, that's what you're worth to these companies.
Yeah. Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you. I've had my friend Joby Work on the podcast a few times. I don't know if you ever seen his work before.
Not familiar.
So he's a long-time Washington Post guy, 2-time Pulitzer winner. He wrote the book Black Flags in 2015.
Oh, yeah, I know what this is, yeah.
Yeah, which is like the explanation book on ISIS and what that whole thing was. But he's very candid about that aspect of things when I talk with him, which I really appreciate. He's like, the best example is, you'll have guys come to you and say, hey, if you report this story, people are going to die. You did a great job. You got your finger on the pulse, but if you report this, X, Y, and Z are going to die, and it's blood's on your hands. And then he's like, we then have to go into a conference room, me and 2 editors, and decide if they're lying to us or if they're not, and, do we send it? And I don't envy that position because on the one hand, you're a bootlicker if you decide to crush the story and then you find out it's bullshit. Either way, people are going to paint it that way. And then on the other hand, it's like, you report it and then, maybe 70 people get blown up somewhere. Like, you got to sleep that night and think about that. But it's your job because there's supposed to be a bigger picture. It gets very, very weird.
Yeah, and try living in Washington where you have friends that you're going to lose if you say something a certain way. I mean, I was very careful and proscribed not to develop friendships with people because I knew that would happen. But I see a lot of younger people that don't know better, and they become friends with these guys. And so there's all these different forms of kind of, I call it soft blackmail, where it's not just you mentioned one, your career viability, your ability to make money, but I just as often, maybe even more, just see it as like, well, I don't want to, make my friend's life a headache, and I kind of get that. And so the solution to that is not to become friends with the things that you need to cover. And unfortunately, they're not going to teach you that in journalism school.
Right. Now, how many years again were you in DC?
About 4 years, I think.
So how would you do that? I mean, that's impressive because listen. It's really hard to talk with someone, 40 times for one story over a year-long period and, in that time, have a drink with them, hear about their family, talk about yours, have this human interaction and be able to keep up that wall while maintaining their trust. How did you do that?
So I approach sources differently. On the one hand, there tends to be a really big premium placed on senior high-level sources like 4-star generals, 3-star generals. Right. To give you an example, I reported on a bunch of documents that were leaked to me about the National Guard deployment to Los Angeles. And the reason I was able to do that before the Times and all the other outlets did, and report that it was called, Operation Excalibur, which I thought was a funny kind of nerd D&D kind of name. And I remember reporting that and thinking, how did no other media, because everyone's looking at this thing that's like of political importance, federal government, imposing into a state, like, what do we think about this? And obviously the whole media was interested in it. And I remember thinking, how did I get that? And I realized, I talked to my editor about it. He says, it's because you talk to the mid-level guys. I was actually talking to the guardsmen. Many reporters are sort of trained to think, okay, you've got to talk to the 2-star general, the 3-star general. It's like this perspective that high up means better insight, and it's just not true. It's like saying that Jeff Bezos knows more about a fulfillment center than some guy working in it. Like, okay, he might know more about like leadership stuff, but he's not on the ground like doing it,
Also, if you're just going to have to say, like, according to an anonymous source or a source close to the situation, in some ways, what's the difference? Because it's just about, does this person
Well, an editor would be like, well,
info?
this is just some guy. Like, how do we know that there's so much anxiety and fear about, like, if you're a 3-star general, you're basically a politician. And you have to know how to interact with other leadership elements and things. And so editors will see that and they'll kind of heave a sigh of relief that it's like, okay, this is some big fancy guy who knows the Washington game. He's not going to get out over his skis in something. And I don't really think that's true. I think they'll avoid political embarrassment. That doesn't mean that they won't get something wrong. But unfortunately, media, that's how a lot of editors think, is how do we not get laughed at by the New York Times or whatever it is,
How were you doing as like a renegade journalist, not trained through traditional journalist school and all that, when you were at the beginning, and especially like when you got that first gig? What was that place called again?
Reader-supported news.
Reader-supported news?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you got that, did they have a little bit of that editorial process in the sense that, okay, I got the story, here's my 4 sources. Obviously it's anonymous, but between us, like, here's who they are, here's how I think they have access. Like, did you get to learn that on the fly?
It was a pretty unglamorous job in the sense that a lot of the work was just aggregative kind of stuff. So like to the extent that I did investigative stuff, it was kind of on your own time, which, like, I really like doing it, so I would do it regardless. If you're listening, you still have to pay me. But so because of that, it was just kind of like a lot on my own. And in retrospect, that was really nice because then you could sort of test things, see what works, experiment in a way that I think if I had somebody that micromanaged me more, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that.
Right. But if you're doing it at the end, it's less micromanagement, right? The way I understand, I've never been in these rooms, but the way I understand is like, maybe at the New York Times or something like that, you got to constantly throughout working on a story, like check, almost get the corporate check of approval at each step. But this sounds like it was more like you were doing something.
Yeah, no, it was much less structured than that because they just had so little money.
Now, you went to the Young Turks after that, which is more of like kind of renegade YouTube. And you're
Yeah, and that
getting
was
there.
their investigative unit. So they, again, just kind of let me do my
freedom,
thing because I
right.
wasn't a YouTuber.
Now, what was it like, though, at The Intercept? Because The Intercept is started by Glenn Greenwald and some other people who came at least from the mainstream world, have kind of those journalistic standards. Was that like a big culture change for you?
Huge. This was like the first corporate environment that I was in, literally the first meeting that we attended. And I quickly learned to hate the meetings.
Hard stop at 5.
Yeah. The first thing was like some consultant talking about, it was so bizarre. It was like talking about like the psychoanalytic reasons to not be on social media or something. I was like, what is this? It was bizarre. And it was like, and I started talking to other corporate friends. They're like, oh yeah, these dumbass consultants. It sounds like you got a certain flavor of it, but that's what exists in all the big companies. I had never had a job at kind of a big fancy place before. So I was kind of like, am I crazy? Maybe I don't get it. Like, and then slowly I realized, no, you're not crazy. You're just not someone that tolerates bureaucracy very well. But like you're saying, that place was largely staffed. But the former editor-in-chief went on to work for the Washington Post. Many of them came from major institutions. So I guess because of Glenn Greenwald's presence, I had hoped that it would be more like, pirate ship kind of thing. And
you knew Glenn before that?
Yes, we were friendly before that.
Got it.
And there were definitely people there doing cool work. But there were other people that, were much more in the mainstream. And so I sort of found myself somewhere that I guess in retrospect, it wasn't really me.
Yeah. Now, what made you go there? Was it Glenn himself or?
Yeah. And the Snowden disclosures, I mean, I mentioned earlier that the whole reason I got into this stuff was like, Occupy was going on, the collapse of the financial institution, and with that, any credibility that I think the intelligentsia had. And then the Snowden disclosures, just seeing, wow, primary source documents put out into the world can really change things. Like they have to deal with that.
Yeah.
They can't tell you to shut up. They have to say, what is this document about? And they have to address it. So yeah, I really respected that because they were the only place that published, and there was all this hand wringing about it. And we can talk about this now, but it's like the media's really lost its nerve. In story after story, they refuse to publish documents that they're in possession of. We mentioned the J.D. Vance dossier earlier. They just pass on things, sometimes without even explanation. Another one would be the Mangione Manifesto. There's just increasingly
you released that too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that they didn't publish this. It was basically all the major outlets had it. Clearly huge public interest in it. And again, it's not about do you publish or not. It's how do you report it responsibly. There's a way in which you can write it that doesn't glorify murder, that doesn't, in the case of the Vance dossier, that doesn't obscure the Iranian government's sponsorship of the hack that got those documents. You can inform people about all those things and provide context about all of that, but there's never a debate about it. It's just, no, we can't talk about this. It's very paternalistic because it's like, you can't trust people to read this stuff because they're just automata that are going to, it's like the Manchurian Candidate. They just hear the code word, they're going to snap into attention. And it's like, no, that's not how people are.
Right. Now let's go back to that actually for a minute because that was in the build up to the election in 24, right? So
yes.
This was maybe August, September, something like that. So you found out that they weren't going to release this. You had your hands on it. How did you get your hands on it? Through the actual leak from the Iranians online?
So I speak kind of critically of a lot of the mainstream institutions, but I'm friends with a lot of people at them. There are cool people at these places, so I don't want to say that there's no good work happening in a lot of them. There's weirdos like me that find themselves in there and they're trying to cause trouble. And so I start talking to some of them and they're all just like, yeah, we can't do this because of blah, blah. And I later found out they themselves got visits or communications with the FBI telling them, hey, this is a foreign influence thing. So there was a quiet thing going on in the background of a lot of these media institutions where, I mean, I guess the FBI would probably say, we're just warning them about the risk. But come on, they're clearly trying to get them not to talk about it.
Wait a minute. So the FBI was going to people in the media and saying, don't leak this because the Iranians leaked it.
Yeah. In one case, I think Reuters reported that even.
What did this dossier even say? I don't even remember.
All it was open source research that the Trump campaign did into J.D. Vance when they were considering whether or not to make him the vice president. And
so
it was the list of their
perceived
liabilities. All of it was, the reason I was comfortable publishing it, I wouldn't publish something like the Steele dossier, for instance.
Right.
Because I don't want to just put out rumors that nobody knows if it's true. It's not right. Even if it's about someone very powerful, it's just a bunch of BS, So it's like, I might talk about it or say there's this thing going around. But in this case, it was an easy call because it's like all of this stuff are his publicly verifiable positions. I just went down the list. He said everything that they said he said.
So it made sense.
Yeah, it's just all factual. There's no risk of defamation. There's no innuendo. So to me, it was an easy call, and I couldn't understand why the rest of the press did. And in fact, reporters I knew at these outlets couldn't understand it either. They were like, this is really weird. Because in 2016, we had the hacked Clinton emails, and I support publishing those things as long as you explain where it comes from and let people come to their own decisions. I don't see this as any different from that, so I don't understand why it was a big to-do.
That's wild, though, because like you just said, 2016, you have the whole Clinton thing. 2020, you have the Hunter Biden thing, where we know also the FBI and intelligence got involved and was like, don't talk about this. And now 2024, shoes kind of on the other foot, where it's something where they think, oh, maybe if you saw the liabilities, this could hurt the Trump ticket. And they get involved, which I don't care what side it is. You don't get involved. Like, that's not your job. It's not what they're supposed to do. It's supposed to be a separation of the fourth estate. But they get involved again. It's like they're going to do this over and over and over again.
And here's the thing. There's so many parties. I'll just give you an example. All these declassified records on the Russiagate thing that Trump has released. Something I'll break some news here. Something no one seems to have noticed in it was it describes how, I think in 2012, there was a Chinese influence operation trying to support trying to support Obama's reelection. That doesn't mean that the election was illegitimate or anything like that. But what it shows is that parties are always trying to push things in different directions. And so to only talk about one at the exclusion of all the others is going to lead to panic and pandemonium about and cause people. That really is what risks people questioning the legitimacy of the election. Because it's, first of all, that's not true that there's only one party that is interfering in these things. And to the extent that they're all doing it, they kind of counteract each other. And so I wish there wasn't as much just panic about these things, because this is just the reality of the world in which we live. And again, no one party can control. It's too much going on, you know?
You make a great point. It's easy to hide a big lie behind a truth. And the truth is, we have the #1 GDP in the world. Every country in the world, friendly and not friendly, all air quotes there, is interested in the outcomes of whatever elections or things
we're doing it. Up. The Israelis are doing it. The Russians are doing it. The Chinese are doing it. And to only talk about one, that's really dangerous, because you're going to make everyone think, okay, whatever that state wants, wow, that's unfair, and someone's pushing the scales down. To not talk about the other hands that I just listed pushing the scale in another direction.
That's right. And sometimes that's what it feels like to me, and I try to like go where evidence is as best I can. I'm just some guy in an armchair, so it's not like I have inside access. I definitely have a lot less than you do. But, you know, whenever I see something being pushed where it's just they try to simplify it all under one thing, I'm like, okay, well, that's definitely not the truth. Yeah. So what's the thing that is the truth? Right. Like, there's another thing. I don't know where the there is, but it's there somewhere. Right. And yet everyone will coalesce, including the people who are fighting back against it. They'll coalesce around the one thing and push it. You'll have the people that are pushing the story, then the people on the other side that then push it against them for pushing the story. And it's like everyone just run over here and play. We're gonna we'll focus over
here. Again, it's a question of context. I'm not saying don't talk about foreign influence. I'm saying provide the context to understand that it's this free for all where everyone's trying to leverage everything and get what they want, and that's just how it is. And there's so much hysteria right now, and it's a real threat, I think, to just the principle, just the principle of free speech, because when you start saying, well, actually, there's illegitimate forms of speech because it's a devious foreign actor or whatever, then that makes people open to the idea that, okay, well, maybe we need to limit certain kinds. What I wish they would look at when the Democrats try to influence public opinion on something and say, hey, look at this candidate. Don't you want him? How well does that work? Very often it doesn't work particularly well. No. Unless you're Trump on the Republican side, it didn't work particularly well for any of them either. And let's look at Jeb Bush, for instance. Tens of millions of dollars put into this guy to try to influence your opinion. And those are Americans writing for their own cultural milieu to try to influence them. How good do you think some Russian guy, a GRU officer, is going to be? Or some China, it's not. Let's put this in proportion. Our corporations are trying to shape thought in the U.S. all the time around advertising, marketing, and their impact is limited. How effective do you think a much smaller campaign run by foreigners is going to be? It's going to be much weaker.
Yeah, I think you have to worry way more about like infrastructure concerns and things like that. Like, oh, could another country shut down our power grids, or like the national security threats? Because to your point, you have all different interests operating at the same time around the world. Yeah. So I don't want to make it overly simple. It doesn't work this way perfectly, but a lot of it cancels itself out.
Yeah,
you have one government that's really trying to do something, another government is trying to do another thing. It's all underground, and like this bot campaign versus that bot campaign, it's going to land where it lands.
It really bespeaks the contempt that I think that like elite quarters have for ordinary people, where they think that they're just automata repeating stuff they heard. And if you ever talk to a person, you will hear all kinds of different ideas, and you realize that people are way more complex than they're given credit for.
Yes. Yeah. And also, this is where it gets simple though too, not to make the opposite point of view, but like you have to understand a lot of people vote on the 1, 2, or 3 things that are really important to them. And that has to do with their environment and where they're from, and usually most importantly, like what's best for their family in some way, something that's personal to them. It doesn't make them a simpleton or something like that. It's just human nature. So people can't comprehend that someone would vote for this thing because they support that, when in reality, the person you're talking to is voting for this other person because there's something completely different from that actually affects their life.
Yeah, I think of my mom, who was a Bernie person, and then she was a Trump person, and now she's not a Trump person. And it's like, if you were to say that in Washington, they would look at you like, what? How can this right wing and it's left wing? But it's to the point you're saying. She wants change, like big change, and she's very dissatisfied with the system. And so to me, it's common sense that these cases exist. But the fact that that can't be understood in the Beltway shows how out of touch they are.
Yeah. And the Bernie thing in 2016, you could see that. Like maybe the more like college urbanite Bernie types, when it got to the election, they didn't vote for Trump. They just sat out, or some of them held their nose and voted for Hillary. But you had in places like Wisconsin and some of these other places where Bernie also was like reaching a lot of people, there were people who were more just with the populism who were like, well, fuck it. All right, I'll vote for Trump. It's better than what we got.
Totally. I remember, so in Wisconsin, I remember at the time, this is forgotten history. It's so central to it. I remember the 2 or 3 weeks before the election, when I was writing for Reader Supported News in 2015, 2016, Obama was going around talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was like the updated NAFTA, extremely, profoundly unpopular in those Rust Belt states because they saw their jobs leave the last time that they did a trade deal like that. And he was going around talking about it during the election. I think Hillary Clinton was too. I can't remember exactly. But I remember thinking, this is not going to go over well. And that is a huge component of what happened that is just not even appreciated at all. I don't see hardly any discussion of it. Instead, it's all of these cultural markers. There's culture war kind of things. And it's like, well, that's at least part of it. And I see that in Wisconsin. You can only imagine all the other complexions of a figure like Trump that just get lost to this kind of simplified narrative.
For sure. I mean, whether or not you think he's honest about it or not, and there's certainly a debate to be had there. He could just be totally like, think the least of these people, but go in and fake it or whatever.
Right.
That's what you have to give him. Like, even if you don't like him, it's like, well, at least he went in there and faked it. He put on the hard hat.
Totally.
He spoke to these people. Like, he went to the coal miners and he was like, clean coal, I love it. And it's like, these people, it's not even like they had been told run along. They didn't even get that courtesy. There were just people in offices on the coast just going, oh yeah, those people will figure it out.
Totally.
And they didn't even talk.
Well, he shows up for things. I remember he got booed by the Libertarian caucus during the election.
In 2016?
No, this was in 2024.
Okay.
And I remember a lot of people laughing about that. It was like a funny incident or whatever. But it turned out that later they ended up voting for him. They ended up endorsing him, Trump. Yeah. And that was a good example. And I look at some of the Democrats, and a point I've made, I have an app that shows me all the TV appearances that different politicians are making, and so I look at
an app that shows that.
Yeah, it's great.
Give me that app.
It's called Snapstream. You can just keyword search anything on basically all the major television channels.
Everyone go download that.
Really useful. And so I'm able to get like an idea of how much different parties are going. And Democrats, they just don't go on a lot of these shows. They don't do very much media. Like you saw Trump go. I mean, the like really high profile example of this was Joe Rogan. And Harris not going on that, and you can debate, okay, shouldn't he have? But it's clearly the case that someone like Trump is willing to roll the dice more on like weird, and certainly J.D. Vance, he went on really obscure podcasts and things when he was running for Senate. And so it's like, I don't know why that is, but it's something that's going to have to change about the Democratic Party if they want to be viable, is just the media's completely changed. It's not even just television anymore. They won't go on these YouTube channels either, or podcasts to a great extent.
Because they can't control it. And that's the thing. Like, Remember the Republicans in like 2012? They had the autopsy or whatever.
Yeah,
After
I remember that.
Romney
Yeah,
lost. They didn't learn anything.
yeah,
They learned nothing.
yeah.
They just weren't as good at like controlling the outcome as the DNC. I always said like the DNC was great at corruption. The RNC was just better at stupidity.
Right.
And so Hurricane Trump comes in and it's like, well, what the fuck do we do? And it's like in some ways he solved that problem for them because then he was able to bring in that generation of people who just, I guess, like say it like it is more. So they're willing to go in these places and not worry about every little word they say. It's like, something really strange happened with the Democrats where like, look at good traditional liberal policies that like are a world that I come from. And like some of them, maybe they'll still adhere to. But then there were just these crazy ideas that they'd set the bar so low that someone like Trump could come in day one, like as president the second time around, and like 20 minutes in declare a victory. And it is a victory where he's like, there are biologically two genders. Here's an executive order. And people are like, yeah. And it's like that's how crazy we got, where you had to adhere to like watching every little word and like going farther and farther down these weird ideological like traps that it then set up all these politicians for failures, because if they did go into independent places who aren't even conservative but are just like some common sense stuff where they're like, you know, why are we giving hormones to 10-year-olds? They're not allowed to give a good answer on that.
I remember it's just so weird to go back, like you're saying, historically, it wasn't the case that there was a party that was averse to not controlled media. And this is a completely artificial and new thing that it's strange. It's like we pretend it hasn't happened or something. Like, what's an example? Like, Buttigieg, to his credit, goes on Fox News, for instance, and I think it's pretty effective. And I don't understand why you don't see more of that kind of thing. But
we got to talk about his appearance yesterday, by the way. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a good idea.
We'll bookmark that, but keep going.
But yeah, it's like this idea that you can just, I mean, Biden was sort of an extreme example of just like the basement strategy, not going out and doing anything, right? Like literally, like, what do you expect, guys? Like you got to go and address people. But there's no attempt to, you know, you see this on immigration, for instance. Once Trump came in, I noticed a lot of Democrats stopped talking about immigration because they perceived, okay, so there's a strong support for it or whatever. And you're seeing support drop in a lot of ways because of how it's being executed. And so what they don't understand is you can mold opinion based on going and talking to people and explaining things, debating things. Maybe they change your mind on something. And instead they treat opinion as something that's written in stone, which is really a shame because it's not true. It hasn't been true historically. If you want to look at like the civil rights movement, someone like Martin Luther King, we don't understand this today, but he started out very unpopular. You can look at polling at the time. And then obviously now he's basically like a American like saint figure.
Right.
And that happened by changing people's minds and going and talking to people that you might really strongly disagree with and who maybe they're even really wrong about something, but still having the time and respect to try to meet them. And
being able to like do it in a conversational manner. The thing that, if I was putting my Democratic strategist hat on, the thing that right after the election I was saying this on podcasts, that I would have been as, if I were a Democratic strategist, I would have been like, yo, we got to get rid of this, is when people were going, like these strategists were going on TV saying, the Republicans invested in the independent media and we got to invest in our own Joe Rogan. It's like, bro, you had your own Joe Rogan. That's literally the point. No one invested in him. Like it's independent. You can't throw money at the problem. You have to throw good ideas at the problem. And this is where I get so cynical, Ken, because I'm like, this is why I believe it's a one-party system. You know, it's two facets. First is historical. Every president since World War II. Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, they whacked him, kept Johnson in there. You know, Nixon, they got him out of there, kept Ford in there, and then Carter. Reagan buys 4 more years for his intel buddy H.W. Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden. It goes left, right, over and over again. We just play this trick in our minds that like the culture shifts. It shifts back and forth based on where power is. And then the second thing is, you look at where the Democrats were in this last cycle. If in 2022 they had just done this, said, all right, we're not going to let just like random criminals come across the border. We're going to stop with all this woke shit. We're going to stop telling people to trans their kids. We're going to stop with telling people whether or not they can get the vaccine. And we're going to stop supporting endless wars, and we're not going to email Twitter and tell them to censor stuff. Those are 6 things that if they did that, the whole country, or a lot of the country, would have voted for them. It's right there. Those aren't like extreme ideas, but they wouldn't do it, which tells me it's like the game is rigged.
Well, I think that when I look at the political system, one thing that makes me feel better about it is that when you see the decisions that are made, that's like half the country or less than half the country voting. And to the extent that more people get involved, that's when you see someone like Obama or someone like JFK or somebody. I mean, Trump was even an example of motivating people to vote who don't ordinarily vote. And it's when you see those moments that interesting things that you didn't think were possible. I mean, we just saw the Mamdani election, and however you feel about him, everyone said this isn't possible. And then boom, suddenly it's possible. And everyone pretended like, oh yeah, actually I was, I thought it could happen all along. It's like, no, you didn't. The entirety of the punditocracy was saying that something like this could never happen in a million years. So the possible, I don't think, is ever what not just the establishment says it is, but really anybody. You can't really know what's going to happen if you can turn people out that don't normally participate in the process.
But it's the same age-old thing too. It's the point you've been making. Mamdani went and talked to people.
Exactly.
He went and talked to people who flipped Trump, like in New York City, and didn't say, "Hey, how could you vote for that guy?" He said, "Why'd you vote for that guy?
Exactly.
I'm just curious."
Exactly.
And like, regardless of what you think of him, I would much prefer a traditional Democrat or Republican than like socialist and fascist, right? And we're talking about a socialist here, but it's like he at least made the effort to go talk to those people. And then you got Andrew Cuomo, getting bussed around with private security just to, go give a speech in some place that no one's listening to. It's like, what the fuck do you think is going to happen?
Right. And so I think it's easy to get depressed at some of the outcomes. But I don't think those are the public ratifying, like, oh, we love Kamala Harris or we really wanted Cuomo. It's kind of like there was no Mamdani then, right?
Yeah.
Or there was no somebody that was going to go and make a case to the general public. So I think
excitement, if you will.
Yeah, people have to participate and get involved. I mean, I see this strikingly in journalism. The kinds of people that are just freaks and consume huge amounts of news often are the likeliest ones who are going to want a sort of partisan picture of what's going on. And it's the people that are less engaged that can make a more interesting audience, that let you piss them off, that let you say things that they weren't expecting, that let you challenge them. And so the goal there, too, is to try to get people involved who don't usually participate in the system.
Yeah, which when you look at like voter turnout at the national elections every 4 years, what are the numbers? It's like 55% or 60%.
For president, yeah. And then like state and local, it's like...
Oh, it's way lower.
Yeah.
But even for president, which everyone talks about online all the time, we're still there's a large portion of the population is just like, fuck it. That's so interesting to me that in these times that's still how it is. But I think that part of that's an indictment on the system itself, because I think a lot of that 40 or 45%, whatever it is, a lot of them do know like basics of what's going on, and they probably do have some opinions on it. But they're like, these people left me behind so long ago. What the fuck difference is it going to make?
Yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah.
It's like America is supposed to kind of stand for the leader of the free world, and so I understand like you're gonna have corruption, you're gonna have things like that, but like it seems like it's gotten to a point where there's no one to turn to, and you've been reporting on it a lot. But like the thing that I think is really shifting culture right now for people is the Epstein story, because they're just trying to bury this thing now, and it's the same like Trump had a base that was interested in this story, and the left was interested in the story too. But like his base was pushing it all the time because of Bill Clinton and all that.
Yeah, it's so funny to see both sides try to be like, this actually makes the other side look bad. It's like, dude, this makes everyone in power look terrible. What are you talking about?
Now, what do you think that was? What do you think Epstein was?
In what sense do you mean?
Do you think he was an intel op? Do you think he was?
Well, so we need to be. I want to see more nuance in how this is discussed, because there's tiers of access for a type of person. So like at the very top there, people throw around the word asset. That's a certain word. Mm-hmm. There's much more informal relationship, which can just be because I know because I'm the beneficiary of this kind of relationship where you go and you talk to intel people and they tell you things and you're not necessarily a confidential human source or you haven't signed a paper or anything. But there's an exchange going on where they ask you things about the world. You ask them things about their world. And you talk about stuff. Do I think that Epstein had that? Absolutely. Oh, sorry, that's my phone.
Oh, you're good. You're good. No, you're good. Don't worry about it. There's people hitting you up for stories. You want to throw them on a speaker? See what they have to say? Just tell them no one's listening. It's just you and me. We're good to go. And, you know, we'll see what happens behind the scenes. It's like a video leak. You know what I mean? Live on the show.
Okay, so there was something extraordinary in the Justice Department review that the Trump administration did that hardly got any attention, which was that, the kind of mainstream response to it was, oh, I found that there was nothing here and it was just a big conspiracy theory. Ha ha, joke's on them because they believe this thing. But if you read it closely, it said, you could pull it up. It says he had 1,000 victims. And what had been alleged by prosecutors before that was like 24 or so.
Personal.
So that's totally.
Personal victims.
I don't remember exactly how they worded it, but I think so. And so that was a huge change in the number that they alleged before. And I just read the document and I'm like, wait a second, that's a big jump. So how did, who were these people? Like, how is there nothing else actionable in this case, given that you've only prosecuted 2 people in relation to it? None of the Johns have any kind of exposure here. And so I was trying to raise some of these questions. And I remember I went on a show and it was like a little bit uncomfortable because I feel like they expected there to be 2 sides. It's a conspiracy side. And then the way they framed it was like, or you're the crazy conspiracy person. It's like, well, there's a third position, which is, just looking at what this review itself found, and it's not just Pam Bondi. You have to have an entire slew of subordinates pulling these things together, looking at this stuff. And so if that wasn't true, someone would have said at this point, the media would have been like, well, we talked to the people in the review and this was overstated or whatever, because they've reported a lot critically on what happened. Nobody's disputed that point, but nobody seems much interested in what exactly it means. So who are those 1,000 people? And that's like industrial scale abuse, right? To have that many victims. And then, so to your question earlier about was he an intel asset? I would guess to me, it's inconceivable that there wasn't some kind of interaction between him, because he's traveling. I'll give you an example. The CIA has something in it called the National Resources Division, and their whole job, they process probably hundreds or thousands of people that travel overseas that come back from a country of interest to the United States, Russia, for example, or wherever. And CIA sort of informally just asks them some questions. They said, so what did you see here? Were there, say you travel to Ukraine or somewhere proximate to it, what do you see there? Were there Russians? Did it seem like there were separatists here? This is a huge collection platform for the CIA. And the way that they target these people are people that travel overseas and might have seen something. Well, somebody like Epstein was friends with heads of state, traveled to Saudi Arabia, said he was friends with MBS, all these things. Not to have been asked that at some point in his years of gallivanting around the world, all these things, it's inconceivable to me. So at least that kind of association, I think, probably existed. But then to say, was he an asset? That formalizes it. The American intelligence community is much less comfortable with existing in a sort of gray space of these relationships as some other services, like Russian services, for example. And so they want to formalize things. If you're going to be an asset, you're going to be an asset. You have to sign this agreement, and here are the expectations, here are the things. So I would guess that they would be too risk averse to do that. But that's just a guess. I don't really know anything about it. But yeah, there are these tiers, and that's how I think it should be discussed, is like how far up this ladder did he climb over the course of his, whatever he was doing. And I mean, he knew all of these heads of state who are explicitly the targets of our collection, whether it's signals intelligence, human intelligence. So for there not to be some kind of association is very hard for me to believe.
Yeah. I've talked about it before, but Tara Palmieri did a couple amazing podcasts back in 2020-ish, somewhere in there. One was called The Maxwells. The other one was called Epstein. She would go around with Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who's now deceased, but that was a major source for her. And they would record some of the people who were around it would agree to be recorded on, audio and run through this. It was like a documentary style. And the thing that I just can't wrap my head around is they got his housekeeper, I think his name was Juan Carlos, to go on record. And this is the guy who was watching his New York house, and then sometimes
this is the guy from the Black Book. Is that him?
Well, he's probably in it, but he was the guy who managed his New York apartment or townhouse, and then I think he would travel with him to other places. And it's I think it was episode 2 of that Epstein series when they did that, but you know, it's tough to listen to because you can tell the guy is weighing so many different things because he would turn a blind eye to stuff and tell himself things weren't happening, but now he knows they were, and like there's tremendous guilt. It's strange. But he talks about how Epstein, like in around 1992, just suddenly he's like, listen, I was helping him out. I worked for him a little bit. He was a wealthy guy, but he wasn't crazy wealthy. And then something happened in 92. And he's like, he got crazy wealthy. Like he did, that's when he started looking at the jet, you know, suddenly had the townhouse, was building a place in West Palm. He's like, you know, I didn't think anything of it. I just figured he was doing a good job at his job. But like, to me, when I see things like that, that's not natural. Like something, there's money that changes hands there. We know he was on all these weird trusts with Leslie Wexner. It's like, well, why is he on that? What are they doing? You know? And so why do you think now there's been this enormous change where you got like Pam Bondi bragging about the stuff she's got on her desk for months, and then suddenly they're like, oh, yeah, no, nothing to see here. In fact, Obama invented this. It's Democrats. Like, what is this?
I wonder if they actually believe that, oh, this stuff only indicts the other side. And then they look at it, it's like, actually, that wasn't true. And they're just realizing it late. Like, that's another thing about Washington, the extent to which they really believe their own bullshit. Like, you come into it thinking it's going to be like, you know, House of Cards kind of thing. But like you start talking to these guys and it's like there's a naivete that's almost shocking where they really believe their own side's propaganda.
You think they believe it or they're great actors?
I mean, there's different types of people in the system, but I very often saw real believers in a way that was even scarier because a true believer, you can't, it's hard to argue again. It's almost a religious adherence in a way that a cynic will pursue their own interests. And so if you can create an incentive structure that would be better, they'll respond to it. You can't appeal that way to somebody that actually believes it.
Do you think we'll ever know even a modicum of the truth on Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, in some ways I see this as a populist victory because Trump, you know, this is kind of the first high-profile example where he just said, no, this whole thing is fake and it's just the Democrats, blah, blah, blah. And his own base, to their credit, was like, no, you said that you were going to do this. Now you've got to do it. And there have been, you know, he's clearly feeling the heat. There's been some things in the way of, I mean, it looks like they're moving close. You know, Congress is making things awkward for him with this subpoena stuff that they're pursuing with Bill Clinton, for example. I think they just subpoenaed, if I read right, I think they just subpoenaed Bill Clinton to respond to a series of questions about
Congress
Epstein.
did.
I think so, yeah. So these are real concessions that happen when people stand up and get involved in something. Yeah, look at that.
Trump and Clinton about to be the Bloods and Crips holding the fucking thing together going, yay.
That's really extraordinary. People did that. This wasn't Trump. This wasn't the Democrats. Yeah. This was people saying, no, you said you were going to do this. Now you have to do it.
Can we scroll down, Joe? What was that, Ken? Sorry.
I think there's this impression that, you know, like, oh, the intelligence community's run amok. There's nothing we can do. And Congress, if it wants to do something, can. Unfortunately, it doesn't want to, but if the public gets angry enough and forces them to do so, as we've seen here, they can.
Well, we're going to see how much the internal party political pressure matters anymore with, say, for example, like this Trump on Massey thing that's going on.
Yeah.
Where like Thomas Massey is also one of the guys who's like, hey, I want to look at this. And Trump's like, fuck you, I'm going to create a super PAC against you. And there, now that, you know, the internet can share this information, there's a lot of people who probably fervently voted for Trump who were like grassroots donating to Thomas Massey right now, who's just a little representative in comparison. So some of the culture shift of like people being aware of the pawns on the table and, you know, once in a while a pawn that might actually say something that's like, oh, we want to keep that guy there. It's very different than it was in 1995, where someone like this could just be silenced and never heard from again.
Totally. I just did a story several weeks ago about how I think the title was like party control collapses. What you're seeing is party discipline, in I think a really healthy way, is starting to disintegrate. Polling shows that the majority of self-identified Democrats not just would like new leadership of the party, they want to kick out all of the ones that are at the top of their party. And in the case of Trump, we're seeing a sort of mirror image of that in this Epstein case. And I wonder if Epstein is sort of symptomatic of a deeper discontent where they're like, you have to deliver on what you said, and here's a very clear example where we can talk about it, and it's something everyone understands, and we can, push on it. But I wonder if there's something deeper there, which is the same thing that's happening with the Democrats, feeling as though stuff isn't being delivered on that they thought would be when they voted for him. So I think on both sides, and then we were just talking about Mamdani, nobody in the party leadership wanted that. Are you kidding? They would have picked a Republican over him. And so the base very clearly was like, no, we're going to pick someone different. And so you're seeing this on both sides. I think it's a really positive development because the leadership of the parties has run everything into the ground. They shouldn't be in charge of things anymore. People should get to what they want. And they're increasingly realizing, I know, just because this guy has all these fancy degrees and they've lived in Beltway, I actually know better than him. And that's really good, I think.
What about, though, when those people, whether it be a Mamdani, a Trump, whoever it is, that the people vote in because they're raging against the system, go in and become the system? Because, I mean, let's just call it what it is. We had a 2-week period there where Trump bombed Iran to risk another war happening, covered up the Epstein files, funded Ukraine with the freshest round of funding they had in a year, and upped the national debt by $3 to $5 trillion over the next 10 years. These are all directly against things he ran on.
Totally.
And he's the outsider.
Well, that's what I'm saying about Epstein. I think it's symptomatic of everything that you just mentioned, and that this is what happens to be here now, and it's something that we can talk about. But I think the polling is pretty clear that on all of those questions, there's a lot of dissension within the Trump zone base and within the country at large. What happens when they become the establishment? I mean, I think Trump always was the establishment, at least since he was president, at least. I mean, how can a former president not be the establishment in some sense? There's different factions.
Oh, you're saying this time around.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it.
But like you were saying before, they did him a real favor by turning him into public enemy number one with this whole all the lawfare that was done. And so they gave him this outsider status that I don't think was really true and really deserved, but the consequence of all that was him enjoying that reputation. And now the bill has come to pay due and deliver on this, outsider thing that he's cultivated. And to the extent that he's failed at it, people are really angry, and they should be. And I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, well, what's going to happen? It almost feels like I get a very strong kind of like, you mentioned Occupy Wall Street before. It feels like the moment before that, and I'm wondering what it's going to be. And I feel like we keep going through, the public response to Luigi Mangione, Mamdani, Epstein. You're seeing people repeatedly say, fuck you. I'm not listening to the people in Washington, even the ones on my side. I want something different. And so it keeps bubbling up. And the question is, what will that culminate in? Because I think we haven't quite seen the climax yet.
I agree with you 100%. I think there is something, if you and I could predict it perfectly, I'm sure neither of us would be sitting here right now. But there are some good candidates, and one that I look at that if you just look at the polling numbers, it's like, this is really interesting, is what's going on in the Gaza war right now. Because if you look at the people, forget Congress, you look at the people. This is, you want to talk about that Bloods and Crips thing again. This is something the left and right is very united on. Like, what we're seeing here appears to be a form of genocide at this point. There's starvation going on. Yes, there is certainly propaganda from Hamas. You have to build that in, but like not all of it. And we'll see our politicians who are paid by AIPAC and other organizations that are friendly to Israel come up and say the same exact lines. Tweet that we can pull up the screenshots of them all tweeting the same exact thing.
They look like, when they get asked a question about it, they look like they're in a hostage video.
Right.
Like there's someone behind them with a gun or something. It's just bizarre.
Did you see Slotkin with
just
unreal.
Insane. And also, if you look at the polling now, very recently, something like 80 or 90% of Democrats are opposed to the war. Yep. That's you would be hard pressed to find anything that there's that much agreement on.
I think the polling's wrong. I think it's probably 99% of them.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so you see the entirety of the party like voters, which is supposed to be the point of political parties, is responding to what people want. And then the actual party in Congress, the exact opposite of that. 90% of the party supports or isn't opposed to the war in any meaningful sense. And it's just like, that cannot persist, where there's a complete consensus on something on the part of the country, and then leadership is the reverse.
And they're like, they're elected to support what their constituents want.
Right.
And then
They're
do the opposite.
representatives. That's what they're supposed to do.
Who was that guy? I don't know his name, but it was in Wisconsin, I think. There was a representative who was doing like his local meeting or whatever, I guess, while they're on what's it called, like recess or whatever. What was this guy's name? Seal or Seelig or something like that? He's from your state.
I don't know.
Damn it.
What do you think?
Can we go to Twitter, Joe? Wisconsin Rep Israel, and there's like a minute 30 video of this guy just getting murked at his yeah, that's it. Pull that bad boy up. He's just getting killed at his local meeting. And this guy's been funded to the tune of $131,000 by AIPAC, and he just goes right to listen, Israel has a right to defend itself. And it's like, bro.
Oh, yeah. The people that are like booing?
Yeah, watch this. This is great. This is what I mean about the disconnect you're talking about. This is this in video form.
Have you addressed the question that was shouted about the starving children in Gaza? Israel has a right to defend itself.
He doesn't believe a word he says. Look at his body language.
You believe in genocide?
I am so disappointed. I am so disappointed in how you represent us.
I don't think you're the right fit for us anymore. You just don't relate to most of us anymore, and you gotta know when to step down. I think it's time.
I mean, that was like, you see it, and there's this thing, you talked about it, like a hostage video. There is this look of admitted defeat,
pure terror, yeah,
on their face before they deliver the preconceived robotic line they've been told to deliver every time, whatever it is, whatever the greatest hits are. Israel has a right to defend itself. Listen, we got to think about this two-state solution, whatever it might be. And you see you see him disintegrate right away. He goes, listen, Israel has a right to defend it. Yeah. Just lay it on. Yeah, I know. It's like, what is that, bro?
It's a system that can't last. It's not going to, I mean, we're already seeing it fall apart. This is what Mamdani was about. I don't even think it's just about Isreal Gaza, although of course people care about that. It's about the fact that in Mamdani's case, he said the thing that lots of people think that nobody else could say. And what does that say about that figure? That his power derives from somewhere different than the rest of the political system does. And that is something that people are interested in, irrespective of what your politics are.
Yeah, and that's what drew people to Trump at the beginning when he was first running in 2015. He's like, I don't take any funding. And then he became the nominee. He's like, fuck, I gotta take some funding. But before then, it was fun because he could really say whatever
because no one else could say any of those things. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like, I think about that Dave Chappelle stand-up from SNL a few years ago where he's like, this motherfucker said, I'm in the room with those people. Like, he walked out of the room that all, the giant club that you're not in, and said, I'm doing it with them. And people are like, that's gangster.
That's literally what it was. Yeah.
But then it changes. I don't know. This could be the thing, though, because there's just something about like that Nixon line I told you earlier where it's like the foreign policy, that's where you got the power. This is a place now that has everyone's looking at it. And it's like a perfect storm because people can relate it back to the United States because AIPAC is not under FOIA and because we're seeing things like them try to pass laws that say you can't say anything bad about Israel or you're going to get fucking deported. Yeah. So people see it here.
Yeah, and not just that. I'm seeing interesting strains where, figures I would not have expected to say this, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I was saying, they have free health care. Why are we funding all this stuff? Why does there need to be billions of dollars in aid going there? And it's like, it's hard to imagine anyone disagreeing with that in the mainstream of America.
If I would have told you a year ago that Jamal Bowman and Marjorie Taylor Greene were spitting some of the same lines.
I saw an interview of Tucker Carlson with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they're talking about Mamdani. And they basically disagree with everything, but they give him his due and they say, he made a good point about how he would stay here in New York to respond to things. I mean, that was bizarre. It was like Israel. It's like, this is a municipal election. And it seemed like it's a scene from like a dystopia movie or something.
That's exactly. It felt like a fake
like
scene in a
RoboCop
movie
or something. Yeah,
like where they're showing the politicians on TV and they pick like the worst actors possible. You're like, that's not real.
Yeah.
That's where Joe and I. That was like 2 weeks, a week before the election. That went viral.
Yeah,
and that's when people started paying attention. Joe and I were looking at each other like, oh, this is a wrap. This guy's got it.
Yeah, I had the exact same reaction.
Just play that clip.
Yeah,
it's like all you gotta do at the end is, I'm Mamdani and I approve this message, and you're good.
America first.
Yeah.
They literally said that on the Tucker Carlson show.
Yeah, and that's it's just getting strange because this is where you get, like I was alluding to earlier, this is where you get all these weird alliances happening where people are feeling the same way on one issue, and to me, it's like, you've already decimated Gaza. I don't understand why this is so hard. Just do a fucking ceasefire. Put your people on the border,
Yeah,
like
it's so late in the game. Like, what is left? Like 10% of the country now that they're talking
who
about?
knows?
So, I mean, the extent to which they keep getting all these warnings. And if they had just listened instead of crying about, for example, the Mangione shooting, the public outpouring of rage against these healthcare corporations, the media's response was to kind of wag the finger and say, "Hey, now this man has a family, blah blah blah." Yes, of course, murder is wrong, but don't you think it says something that people are responding this way? Ordinary people, regular nice people, are saying things like this. There's deep pain here, and they don't listen to it, and they keep not listening to it because things like that keep happening.
Yeah, you shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
There's something there,
Yes,
separate from
You don't have to glorify or support what the kid did. No one should be gunned down in the street. Like, that's not what we do. That's not what we're supposed to do in a civilized society. But, like, how do people, to your point, how do people get there? And
Right.
there aren't enough asking these questions. But then cynically, dude, it's like, well, those are the same companies that fund all the campaigns of the people who would be responsible for asking those questions. So are they ever really going to get asked?
I mean, if you look at the outpouring of support it was a bizarre week when the shooting happened, because I remember I saw all these people just posting their personal stories about having healthcare claims denied and things. And so they weren't able to stop that. And I think if this all comes down to this climax that I'm talking about, what is all of this going to culminate in? And I don't think we really know yet. That will determine if the establishment is able to maintain control.
Do you view this as like a kind of, as a, how do I want to say this? In the worst case scenario, the types of cultural gathering storms, whether you mix like what's happening with Luigi or what's happening with Israel or what's happening with Congress, or all these different things coming together. In the worst case scenario, it's a gathering storm of like end of empire type events.
Well, if you look at I always love saying this, if you look at the Greek basis for the word apocalypse, it means rebirth. And so creative destruction. There's the destruction, which can be ugly, but there's also the possibility of creation, something new growing where the thing had been destroyed. And so I think it's really, I always try to drive home the point, it's up to us what we decide to do with this moment. It can go either direction. It can be very ugly. It can be constructive. It can be a mix of both, as it often is. It depends what the people who, the establishment and the elites are going to respond how they always do, which is to try to hold on to everything and keep it the same. The variable that might look different is what is the public who doesn't have a stake in that system, which is like most people. What are they going to do? Right. I don't know.
I got a picture of Walter Cronkite up there in the corner. I think about this a lot because like he was like the GOAT of the game and just reported the news and all that and kind of invented it in a lot of ways. But, he did something in the 70s that I actually think was amazing, which is he realized how wrong things were when he went on the ground in Vietnam. And so he began to inject a little bit of not even necessarily opinion, but like really reporting on the facts of that and driving it home to the American people. Like, we're sending our guys to die over here for what? The whole thing. And I think about it a lot because it's like it also inadvertently created this slippery slope to where then opinion starts working its way more and more and more and more into journalism. So all that being said, when you are looking at the chessboard the way you just looked at it with how things are, how do you check your, I asked you about your bias like a little bit earlier, like as a human being, but to come back to it, like how do you check your opinion at the door when there's so many storm clouds around all the time and, you're going to be able to see some things that the average person doesn't even have the time to see because there's so many layers to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say nothing helps like talking to the people in the trenches, because I can't tell you how many times I have read as much as I can find about something. And in our internet age, it's kind of everyone's first instinct is what can I find about something versus talking to somebody. I'll give you an example. When I was doing stories on Amazon fulfillment centers in 2020 about the pandemic, I was struck by how many people said, I want to try to unionize now. I want to try to demand better working conditions because clearly they don't care about us and I might literally die. So what difference does it make at this point? What do I have to lose? And I was really struck by that because I didn't see that in the coverage at all. You sort of saw a lot of sad stories about what was happening, but you didn't see this response to it and the kind of energy that was building up to push this kind of a response. And I only could have gotten that by literally just messaging people, calling them, saying, hey, I'm just curious for a perspective. I'm not looking for a certain soundbite. And either way, just whatever you think, and just give them the floor or whatever. And that was the theme that I heard. I wouldn't have found that anywhere, at least at the beginning of the pandemic. And then I go and I start reading about the history of pandemics, and they often have a kind of paradoxical thing where obviously there's a tragedy of a lot of people dying, but that it tends to empower labor because the people that have died, that not only gives people a motivation to be like, wow, I'm on this earth for a limited period of time and really think about mortality in a way that, especially today, is unusual. But it also just makes their labor more valuable because there's fewer of them. And that really struck me just from talking to these guys. And I wouldn't have realized that had I not done that.
What did you find in exploring the Amazon fulfillment centers? Because, I mean, we all take it for granted. I'll be the first guy to tell you. I get my shit right to my door.
Yeah,
and
me
the
too.
service is unbelievable. But obviously there's some weird ways that sausage is made.
Yeah, it's just that there's this underclass that you could find any number of interviews of Jeff Bezos, of the senior executive group, and I'm sure they have their own, perspective and insights, but nobody had really talked to these guys. And just hearing the day-to-day was very different than the kind of popular imagination. And many of them wanted to have, it's not like they wanted to have Amazon not exist, but they wanted to have a system that could work better, I thought, for both themselves and like the entirety of the system. That's what I was struck by, was it's not this black and white thing. It's like, how do we work together to create something that is beneficial to the whole, rather, because everything gets cast as like this existential battle or whatever. And that wasn't really what I heard. What I heard was a lot of people that were going to school at the same time that they're there, and kind of like the military, honestly. If you watch a bunch of movies, you'll have a certain attitude about it. And you talk to the kids, they're some of the most critical people about the military that I've ever talked to are people in the military, like enlistees, people in the NCO world. They just go off. And it's like, again, another thing that you wouldn't have expected had you not picked up the phone or went out and just talked to people.
In the rank and file.
Yeah, exactly.
We're seeing it on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've heard some dystopian stories. I imagine some of them are certainly true, but like in the Amazon fulfillment centers, is there like a lot of truth that the cameras will follow people around? And some people, I've heard stories like people will wear diapers on the job so they don't have to go to the bathroom, otherwise they're going to get canned or something like that. Did you find stuff like that?
So I got a bunch of leaked stuff. About the not having time for bathroom breaks problem. And what I found that really surprised me was that they had systematized this. Management was aware of it to the point that they had policies in place. And I would say the most dystopian thing I saw was that there wasn't a serious change towards giving them more bathroom breaks, or at least at the time that I was writing. This was like in the height of all that stuff, when it first started getting reported a lot. But that there were punishments for if you had, like, people were urinating in bottles and hiding them in their car, and if those bottles got found, you would get in trouble. And it's like, shouldn't there be something for where they don't have to do that? But no, you just get punished if you get caught doing it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Man.
They had like formal directives, an entire system around punishments related to this. So clearly management was not only aware of it, but they had a whole system for how to deal with it. None of it, as far as I could tell, was constructive. It was just this punishment. Like it was kind of, don't let people know about it.
Yeah. And that's why there were, I think it was around here actually in New York, there were the guys like trying to unionize it, and they did the walkouts and stuff. And like, I get it. Like if that's what you're setting up, and but I guess they're paying them like $15 an hour and stuff like that.
Well, the problem is, so the employees make $15 an hour, but it's some huge percentage are actually contractors, and that's many of these. So they've created a contractor system where they don't actually enjoy the benefits of a formal Amazon plan. That's like the majority of their employees, yeah.
So they don't really have workers' rights.
Exactly, yeah. And that was a big complaint that a lot of them had.
So that's how they get around it.
Dystopia. Okay, I had another story about they had created some system of like, I think they were paying people to run Amazon accounts. I don't know if you remember at the time. They had like little boxes in their like emojis in their Twitter bios.
No.
Like I work for Amazon. And they were given these like robotic lines to be like, I can't believe you were skeptical of Amazon. It's a great place to work. I love it here. And it was like an army of these guys that they had hired. And I had leaked to me like the records, like telling them like, and they were like, oh, and maybe we're gonna have a comedic like personality that's gonna be edgy, and they had this whole plan for how to react to this instead of just making there not be pee bottles. To just have all of these kind of like an army of Amazon influencers, basically.
Yeah, they probably hired slave labor in the Philippines to do it too. They didn't even give U.S. jobs to that one. Jesus Christ! But also, I mean, not for nothing. And you see this, I'm not just picking on one guy. You see this at a lot of places, whether it be mainstream media outlets or places that disseminate information. It's always follow the money. Like a guy like Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. I think Carlos Slim, maybe that's not true anymore, but he owned like the New York Times or something like that. So you have these very powerful people who, it's not like they have their finger on every story or whatever, but just like the general consensus of where some things are going to go, you like leave it in their hands to control that, when it's supposed to be a system of just informational gathering and reporting, and now you've injected rich people into it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. That was the like precipitating event that caused me to leave The Intercept. I did a story about an Amazon or a Bezos Foundation grant of like, it was something like I think it was like $10 million that went to former Admiral William McRaven and Eva Longoria. And so I was just...
And Eva Longoria?
Yes, the actress.
Can we pull this up?
This is insane. This is real.
Eva Longoria. And Ken Klippenstein, Eva Longoria.
I just saw this. I'm like, these guys don't have enough money? You can't think of anyone to give a charity grant to that would make better use of it than William McRaven. Yeah. And so...
read this. That's a great title, bro. Read the story The Intercept tried to kill. That was right after you left, right?
Yep. And so this is the precipitating thing. So the general counsel at our company at The Intercept said, oh, you're criticizing a billionaire for a donation that's kind of similar to the billionaire that funds our media outlet. I mean, he's saying this to my editor at the time, not to me.
And who was that billionaire?
Sorry?
Who was that billionaire funding Intercept again?
What's his name? Pierre Omidyar. So it's like a billionaire philanthropist that gave money to The Intercept.
He sounds like a rich guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and it's like, well, I mean, I can't help that it sounds like it. Like, that doesn't make it not a story. And so they didn't want to run, he complained about that. And it was just like, I can't be somewhere who's not going to let me write. I mean, The Intercept was founded on this kind of counter national security thing. It's a story about William McRaven, who one of the co-founders, Jeremy Scahill, wrote a great book about Dirty Wars, his role in the Special Operations Command. And to not be able to write about that at the very same place that was founded by that, it was just like this. It wasn't the first problem, but it was like by far it was just like, I can't believe in this anymore.
Straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, exactly.
How long before this had Glenn Greenwald left?
Maybe like a year or two prior, I think.
Did you talk to Glenn like when he was leaving or deciding?
Yeah, we've been friendly the whole time.
Yeah, what was his logic there? Because he co-founded this place.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was very hurt by it because there's this impression it's like, oh, everyone's leaving. It's like some New York Times reporter was like, these guys are making money by leaving and going independent or whatever. It's like, do you realize like how destabilizing it is to like not have a steady paycheck and like have no idea what's going to happen? It's like people don't do this stuff unless you really feel like you have no choice. Glenn really tried to make it work. And, my sense, both in his public remarks and talking to him, is that he wanted it to work and it just didn't. And it's like you get to it's kind of like a divorce. It's like, do you know how bad things have to get for somebody to, that doesn't usually happen. I think there's this impression that it's like, oh, somebody saw dollar signs and they can go and make a bunch of money on their own. It's like, it's much easier to just stay in a thing that works, than go off and, as I'm sure you know, running something is a headache. There's so much administrative stuff that's unrelated to the the direct work that caused you to want to get into it, that people don't make that jump for better or worse until it's like they really have to. And that's kind of how I felt at that point.
Yeah, so you waited it out a while, but you also knew the other side too. You had done a lot of things.
That definitely helped. There wasn't that fear factor of like, oh, what will it be like? Can I actually do it? Because I knew that I did do freelancing for a period of time, and then I was better known at that point, so it was much easier. I have a lot of sympathy for people that find themselves in tough, situation. And I was saying before, like a lot of these corporate outlets, they have good people who maybe don't want to make that jump because of what we're talking about now.
Are these the years you were living in D.C., by the way?
Yeah.
When you were with The Intercept?
Exactly, yeah. I was at the D.C. Bureau.
Oh, and I mean, so what, 4 or 5 years there? Something
like that, yeah.
And those were a crazy 4 or 5 years you were there, too. Like, that's a nuts time.
I was there for January 6th, and I remember the choppers flying overhead, and just, it was crazy, yeah.
Yeah, you're, like, in the long haul, that's probably such a good move for you because you can say you've been in it and you've seen it.
That's the thing.
You're not just talking from the outside.
Exactly. And the thing is, some of it was I had to remove the mystique because I remember when I was younger, being in Wisconsin, I'm kind of like, man, I'm really missing out on all this stuff, all these great sources. And you go there and you realize there's some things that are useful, but so much of it. I'll give you an example. One time I did a story on what is it called? There was a U.S. military base in Jordan along the border of Syria where 3 service members were killed at the beginning of last year, I think it was. And I think it was called, what was it? I can't remember the name of the base.
Joe will get it.
But
he's got it. I see it.
Yeah, Tower 22.
Tower 22.
Yeah, and it had never been disclosed that the base was there. First we're hearing about it is that guys die, which is enraging because it's like we don't even, and it doesn't need to be, like the existence of it doesn't need to be secret. Like maybe you don't have to talk about the weapon systems and stuff, but come on. We should know this is basic stuff about our foreign policy. We have a base in an allied country that we're not even allowed to know about. So I was very frustrated about that. And so I go and I end up doing a story interviewing people that had worked there and finding out that the suicide drone that had killed these 3 people, they didn't have anti-air in place even. And so I hear this and I'm thinking, you're right next to, these Iranian proxies and you don't have an anti-drone technology after all this money that we've spent on this. I couldn't believe, and so I go, and naturally, it just sounds too insane to be true. So I'm going, trying to check with other people to verify it. You always want to go to you want to give the other side a chance to be like, knock it down so that it's true. So I go to the Pentagon. A Pentagon spokesperson starts talking to me. He says, and I said, look, don't you have what's it called? An itemized list or an inventory of what material you have there so that you can say, here's what we have, here's what we don't have. He goes, here's the crazy thing. I don't actually know what we have there. And I said, what? He says, the Pentagon is a mess. It's like this huge sprawling institution. I should have known this because this has always been, this is my point.
They were missing $2 trillion the day before 9/11.
Exactly, right? Yeah, and this was probably weeks before the every year they have their budget that they're supposed to go through.
But they fail.
And they fail the audit. Literally, they've never passed an audit.
Nothing to see here, bro.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, is this guy bullshitting me? Because he's a spokesperson. So I go start calling on very well connected general. He says to me, yeah, we don't actually, we don't have a clear, we might have an idea of some things, maybe even a lot of things, but we don't know everything that's at these, it's like all these buckets of information, it's mismanaged. And this is a far-flung base that's not going to be as staffed up and formalized as UCOM or something. Mm-hmm. So it ends up being true, and I report it, and then afterwards, the Washington Post, I think they verified that afterwards, corroborated it. But it was just this learning experience, like, wow, the movies where it's just Jason Bourne, you pull up the computer and you look and they've got access to everything. It's like they've got a lot of stuff, but that doesn't mean that it's all communicating with each other and that it's coordinated and that there's any kind of organization.
Yeah, that's a pattern. I mean, you've probably picked on it fucking 50 million times more than I have just because you've covered stories for so many years. But even like in me just doing episodes here with a handful of people here and there who had access to the Pentagon or something like that, the theme that they all come away with as to why it works, and I'm also going to double entendre this and say this is why it doesn't work, is compartmentalization. So like even the Secretary of Defense, he don't even know fucking 90% of the shit that's happening.
This is the problem with secrecy. It doesn't just hurt the public, it hurts the government too, because they can't communicate with each other. And you see this again, and 9/11 is like the most high profile example of it. But every time something goes wrong, it's like some group wasn't communicating with some other, faction within government. So this is the point I was trying to make. Transparency would help the bureaucracy as well as the public. And it's really crazy that point is not made publicly, because it's certainly appreciated in private. They just can't say it.
They can't say it?
Yeah. I mean, people at the very top, they don't want transparency for a variety of reasons. But at the rank and file, that's well understood that, FBI has its own. I mean, the number of duplicative roles that these agencies have, a counter disinformation, presence within the CISA agency and Department of Homeland Security, in DOD, in CIA. I mean, all of this and human, let's say confidential human sources. Border Patrol has its own, FBI has its own, DIA has its own, CIA has its own, and ne'er the three shall meet. They don't communicate. They all have their own standards and things for how they handle it. Does it need to have 16,000 different systems like that? I mean, none of this stuff is even discussed because of the secrecy around it all.
There's parts of it that in conducting an investigation that I understand, right? Like if you have some crazy source or whatever, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. But then it's a slippery slope to that then being used as like the blanket excuse for anything that's like, well, we'll have too many cooks in the kitchen if we get this piece of information or that information. And
there's ways you can talk about it where you minimize the specifics, but then can give people general information, which is just refuse to do.
Right. Now, if you're going to steel man it, I don't know if I'm using that term correctly there, but bear with me here, and look at it from the perspective of the people who want total secrecy. And this is also the danger to it too. They look at our quote unquote enemies, look at China or something like that, and they're like, well, they're fucking communists. They not only do they not share anything, they kill anyone who says the wrong thing. We have to play on the same level as them at least when it comes to our personal information. Our people don't need to know about that. But then it gets dangerous because instantly somewhere that gets into some sort of constitutional violation or something that literally makes you the thing that you hate. It's this very weird catch-22 that they play with, and I don't have the right answer for all of them, but to your point, there has to be some level of all right, we can actually tell people this. Maybe not the day it happens, but we can tell them 2 months later and we'll deal with it.
Look at the meltdown on the part of I see about the JFK stuff being declassified half a century later, and they're still complaining about sources and methods. It's like, guys, if you're going to do that about this, how can I believe anything that you say?
Did you go through those docs?
Some of them, yes.
What'd you think?
There's historical significance to us. This is our story. This is American history, and to be denied stuff about this is just outrageous. Completely aside from the JFK question. I mean, I was laughing at one of the parts of it where they were talking about what was it? They said that there was suspicions on the part of France about the CIA's presence there when there was a coup attempt against de Gaulle in the 60s. And they said that people could see when people were in the CIA because the lights would turn on in the building and you would see the lights. I was just laughing. It's like, these are the great geniuses at work that don't have some system in place to make it so lights don't go on at 2 a.m. Because apparently that caused this whole nationalist panic because the lights go on at 2 a.m. in the middle of the coup attempt or whatever. And so this was revealed in the document. And that's the thing. And all these things you can see, okay, was there a sources and methods reason, or were you just embarrassed by this and you don't want people to know about it? Because it sure looks like the latter to me.
But why? That's to your point, though. Why are you embarrassed about something that some guy did who's dead?
Well, that's the other thing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like-
totally. Well, that's the other thing. Is like to the extent that embarrassment matters at all, it's like, yeah, everyone's dead that was involved in this. So it's like it shows you how much they get away with, because they settle into this mood of like, well, they're gonna let us do this, so we can do this, and it's like that's how you behave when you get everything you want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, from what I saw, it didn't. I was glad we at least got something. Like, I'll give credit where it's due. We got some documents that we've never gotten before. All right, cool. But it doesn't, I think there was like 80,000 pages or something like that. It didn't seem to give like a smoking gun or paint the exact picture of like, this is really who planned it and this is how it happened. So we have really good sourcing to be able to say reasonably these are probably the people in the United States government who wanted this guy dead. Maybe they used help from these guys in Cuba or these guys in the mob, whatever, but that's how it went down. But we don't have that like distinctive information. And unfortunately, the other side to that I do see that's beyond like sources and methods of like protecting some individuals is that if you admitted as the United States government that people in your government, which the average person is just going to define as the government, right? One thing, people in your government were complicit in the death of a sitting United States president, even if that's 60 years ago, it creates an existential crisis for them because people are going to be like, well, if these organizations did that, we should just get rid of them now. And it's like, I'll admit, that's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, I wonder how much thought is even going into it, because so much of the secrecy response is just reflexive at this point. I'll give you an example. I talked to somebody who used to work in the FOIA office of the records office of the FBI, where they respond to people, requesting declassified records.
They're like, fucking Klippenstein's on the line again. Damn it.
No, I was on a list. They had a list called high volume team for people that file too many requests. And what I thought was funny about that was HVT is a term in the national security world that stands for high value target. So I was freaked out to find out that I was on this list.
That's a catch-22 for you.
So anyways, I found out that they had written on the wall, I don't know if still, but at the time it said, when in doubt, black it out. The idea being just redact it. There's no downside to it.
Wait, they wrote that on the wall?
Literally, yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
On a whiteboard?
That's how seriously they take
Like
it. No, it was just like a piece of paper on the wall, just like trying to inform people like, hey, if there's an edge case, just don't put it out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was reported.
Can we pull that up?
Yeah.
That's wild. Like, that's one of those things, like, you're the office manager, you walk in, you go, God damn it. Who the fuck put that on the wall? What's understood doesn't need to be explained.
But they get their way. I mean, the only oversight for FOIA, and I've done this, is if you take them to federal court, and that's a long and protracted.
You've done a lot of, like,
a lot of FOIA
litigation.
Stuff. Yep.
That's got to cost you a lot of money.
Fortunately, I have a wonderful public defender who does this just like for the love of the game.
Wow.
And
Shout out love of the game.
Yeah, Beth Borden. Shout out Beth Borden. Thank you for all your help.
Shout out Beth.
There are
Girl.
many lawyers that do things pro bono. And this is something that she does. But
are you involved in any actively right now?
Oh yeah.
Are you allowed to talk about any?
Like
of
3
them?
or 4. I don't even remember some of them because they've been in litigation for so long. I mean, this stuff takes that's a downside. People think, oh, just take it to court, and that's really the only redress that you have. So I do it, but this is like takes like 4 or 5 years in many cases. Yeah.
Are you now? How? So you're going straight. Obviously, this is in national courts. It's not in state courts.
Yeah.
But like, is this in D.C. every time, or
this is in Florida where my attorney is based?
Okay, so they do. So they do.
So
it
it's like the
wherever
Florida
attorney's
Circuit
based
Court.
Because,
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And in many cases, the Justice Department people are like, "What is FOIA?" Like, I've never done a FOIA case before.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
There it is.
Oh my God, it's government wide? I didn't know that. I thought it was just FBI.
The phrase "when in doubt, black it out" is a colloquial expression often used in the context of government document redaction, suggesting that if there's any uncertainty about whether information should be released, it's safer to withhold it by blacking it out. The practice reflects a tendency towards overclassification and caution in government transparency efforts.
Look at that. The National Security Archive, that's what the George Washington University, if I remember right. They have documented cases where they adhere to this. That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the process of litigation, you don't just say, okay, you're supposed to give me this record. Then they say, oh, do you want to have the next 9/11 on your hands? Like,
That's right.
So then you go back and forth and you fight with them. It's really like a street fight because you're like, that blacked out part, that doesn't need to be there. And then the judge goes, okay, does it need to be there? And then they go, well, here's why it needs to be there. And so you kind of negotiate to some mediated thing. Yeah, it's an endless process.
So and it's 4 or 5 years for some of them sometimes.
Oh, yeah. It can be even longer.
Are you doing depositions on this all the time? Or not
No,
that kind of stuff?
fortunately, it's kind of like more of a custodial process. So I haven't had to do that. But yeah, and then you get rolling documents and they'll produce things. Maybe it'll be like 800 pages a month or something. That's kind of like that's a number that I've seen for several different requests. But yeah, it's like its own thing that you have to maintain and keep up with and check in on.
Jesus Christ. I mean, it's also, do you think there's some sort of weird human, I don't know, draw towards wanting to know things other people don't? And that's part of why they protect it. It's like, nah, this is just for us.
That's my draw for doing national security. It's because I don't know if you picked it up, but I don't like elites very much. And what I see in national security is the most concentrated form of just that elite attitude of we get to know and you don't get to know. And so then I want to know.
Yeah. And then you see these guys, there's 2 turnstiles that happen when they walk out of these agencies and places, right? One turnstile takes them just to some private contracting company where they hand them a lanyard and they walk back in the same door the next day and they get a desk there. Very interesting. And now they just get paid fucking 40 times as much. And then the other turnstile sends them to insert news media outlet here where they can go in and say, no, you guys have this all wrong.
There was a news outlet, I want to say it was CNN, that actually had an NYPD office in CNN. I'm not making this up.
Come on.
Can you pull that up? This is an insane story.
They had an NYPD office in CNN.
I think so, yeah. And so to give you a sense of what did I call it before? Soft blackmail that exists?
Yeah,
like,
that's a
because
great
you want
term.
their stuff, and so you've got to write it a certain way.
CNN has a New York bureau where John J. Miller, the chief law enforcement intelligence analyst, is based. Miller previously... Well, that's not the... Can we get... Let's just edit that to CNN and... Oh, yeah. No, that's exactly what I want to put. Fuck. So, all right.
And they've had reporters who themselves were like the senior communications director of CNN or of these agencies go and work. Literally.
The comms guy.
Yeah. My editor had worked at NBC with, I think, the person who's currently the CIA spokesperson. It's ridiculous. And it's so many different agencies that they have this.
It's just hard not to think it's like running cover. You know?
They don't even have to because they have all this stuff
That's
done
what I'm
informally,
saying.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah. They're right there. You know?
Well, not to mention they have I'll give you another example. The FBI has in its confidential human source program, they have different categories that they list. This is all in like public government records. And so they have a section for media sources. Why would you have a section for media sources? Well,
The go-tos.
Yeah. And I did a story a few weeks ago on some documented cases of reporters who served as confidential human sources to the FBI. It's really concerning because then it's like, well, are they protecting sources? Does the government know what these outlets... I mean, one of the documents, I think, described how the government knew a story was going to come out that hadn't even come out yet.
Yeah.
And so they were preparing their own comm strategy to be able to respond to it. And it's like, well, how the hell do they know that?
I think it would be so interesting to get you in here with a Fed. And not like John Kiriakou and someone who's like, you know,
No, I have
pulling everything
I
out.
have friends because there are people in government that are good and care about this stuff and also don't like it. That's
yes,
been the
but
biggest.
I want to get you in here with a guy who might defend it.
Oh yeah, I would love that.
Like
a debate.
One of those. Like get fucking Bustamante in here, just like gargle the government's balls or something with a cannon and see what happens. That'd be funny as shit. Because but you know what? This is a good example because
Look at that, privileged or media source. Nobody talks about it.
what am I looking at?
That's a category for the confidential human sources.
Oh, this
that
is
means
the
that
actual document.
yeah, And this is from the Justice Department, right?
Yes.
So
The
no
AG
conspiracy theories.
guidelines.
It's right there. Yeah.
Justice.gov.
Right.
Oh
And
my
I remember,
God.
if I remember right, it also says lawyers. So people's lawyers could be informing on them to the government.
High level government or union source.
Yeah. Doesn't it say attorney somewhere?
Can we do
I'm not
a
sure which
find
document.
next attorneys? Or?
Oh, that's gonna be too
In
many
the
hits.
60s.
Yeah.
All right.
I know they have clergy also. They have a section for clergy.
Come on.
Yeah. And I think
They're
they
like,
have
we
one.
found you with a little boy. Now give us the information.
It
We'll
might-
keep you out.
It might not be that document. There's different ones that itemize them. And they have one for physicians, doctors. And it's just like, shouldn't there be rules against this stuff?
Yeah.
Your lawyer is supposed to work for you. Like they can't be
That's
informing
right.
again,
and then
right? Like,
Physicians, it's HIPAA.
right. Or just like what?
It gets yeah.
Yeah,
This
there's-
is where
there's
this
different
is where,
CHS
like
guidelines.
that. You ever see those? They're not Venn diagrams. The like circle charts where it has the arrow from one to another, and it goes like back in the full circle where it goes opposite, 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 opposite back to the beginning. It's like that's what this is with the Constitution. Like break everyone's constitutional rights, protect the Constitution,
Yeah.
support the Constitution, and keep going.
My friend calls it the human centipede.
The human. Oh, I'm gonna use that. That's good. That's so good. Human Centipede was ahead of its time. That movie.
I never saw it actually. I just saw the memes.
You know, I don't want to say I'd recommend it.
It seems like one of those. It's kind of like Idiocracy kind of thing where it's like a little too real.
It's like Snakes on a Plane that just went a little bit insane. You know?
Look how redacted this one is.
What are we looking at, Joe, here?
The CHS guidelines, but I'm just laughing at how redacted it is.
Yep.
Wait,
Like-
the CHS guidelines?
Yeah. So this was
Yeah.
under FOIA. There should be a leaked.
Oh, confidential human
There
source.
should. I think there's a.
It's just.
Oh, they whited this one out, so you can't say they
Oh,
blacked it
whited
out. This is a Matt Cox special, white out.
That's what they do. I think it looks less sinister if it's like whited. You know.
Look at that. It's
Yeah.
a nice look. Steve Jobs would approve. It's a simple, open, white space page. Look at that. The whole page is whited out.
Well, this is my life.
Oh my God. Do you ever, like, you obviously got to have a real love of the game to go through minutia, because that's what you're doing.
it's
You're
more-
going through minutia.
It's more contempt and like really hating the guy responsible for that and being like, I'm not gonna let this fucker get away with this.
Good
you
for
know?
you. I mean, someone's got to do it.
That's a lot of the motive.
But like these are This is not like reading a nice novel or nice journalism. These are fucking,
Well-
Linda at accounting wrote this out.
My editor likes to say, going up against national security state, it's like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It can rip you asunder, but it's got a brain the size of a pea. So in this case, with these, there will be court litigation. Maybe they forget to redact something in that. There will be another document referencing that one that maybe has a reference to it. It's really hard, and they're fairly incompetent at preventing it from tumbling out into the digital ether. Digital exhaust is so omnipresent now that for them to catch every reference in every document and not screw up, it's almost like law enforcement says. They have to keep, they only have to screw up once, right? And that's how this stuff is. And now everything is online, so you can find stuff instantaneously. And so I'm always just hunting for that. What is that one thing they forgot to remove? Because they have to communicate with other local law enforcement. They have to convey things to them. One game I like to play is ask for the same type of record, but ask for the federal record that was provided to a state and local law enforcement agency, because they're going to have a less sophisticated FOIA system.
Find the
redacting it.
holes in the ship.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So if you can deal with the people in D.C., you call like fucking Scott in Gloucester County, you're good. You got 'em.
Exactly.
It's like, I'm your friend, pal.
Yeah.
I got
Or they worked a case in Idaho and they sent something to the Idaho Fusion Center.
the Idaho Fusion Center.
Yeah, so every state has something called a fusion center. Since 9/11, they established these things that are supposed to coordinate between state, local, and then the federal government. And so the federal government will surge intelligence to them. They'll share intelligence with the federal government. These fusion centers can be a great way to find out about what the federal agencies are doing, because being state institutions, even though they coordinate with the federal ones, they share intelligence, but they don't have the same, how do you say, just just stuff guarding that information. It's easier to get.
My inkling when I hear something like that, and tell me if I'm totally off base here, would be that there's probably a lot of information going up from the states to federal, and not a lot. Like the shit's going down from federal to the states.
No, it's definitely both.
You think it's both?
Yeah, it's definitely both. Because the federal agencies are supposed to be like, they want to make themselves relevant. So they're like, hey, we've got this warning. This threat assessment is relevant to you. Like, if you talk to any cop, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's the paperwork that's the email that you never open because it's useless. Right. But it's just some practice that the government does.
Until it's not.
Yeah.
Until like those.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Like January 6th, I think there was a report the FBI field office in Virginia had, where just nobody read. It was like, yeah, sorry, we didn't read it. And they had a warning about it, it's like anybody, it's like any other job where it's just like, there's all this junk. You have your boss yelling, you don't really look at it,
Yeah. I mean, even when you look at the build up to 9/11, when you study that, and you correctly mentioned that earlier, it's like it was the worst communication ever, especially between CIA and FBI and sharing any information. But it's like, there were a handful of people who were like, hey, we might have a little issue here. And everyone else is like, yeah, okay, all right, yeah, whatever.
In virtually every case, there's people like that being like, please, we need to do something. And then the senior executives are just like, not my problem.
And then the day after, they're like, all hands on deck, let's go. Or
totally.
The second after. It's just, it's human nature.
Well, this is a huge part of the secrecy, which is that yes, sources and methods is a thing. And that's something, you don't want to get an asset killed or something. But they also don't want stuff coming out so that you can have a forensics trail to say, hey, you knew about this, or you should have known about this. Why didn't you do something about it?
Right.
So I just wish there was a little more skepticism in teasing those two things out.
For sure. Real quick, I just got to go to the bathroom, but we'll be right back. Thanks. All right, we're back. Yeah, we were just talking about John Kiriakou. He's, honestly, I don't know that I've ever had a dude in here who can just seamlessly cook on the most visual, insane story out of nowhere and then switch it out of nowhere to something completely unrelated, and it just works. Like, as a guest, he's something else, but his life story is insane.
He's a great example of how the CIA is different than what you would think from watching movies, which would have you think that there are these, very athletic, kind of like, not saying John's not athletic necessarily, but he's kind of a nerd, and he's like very well educated, very well read.
Yes.
And a lot of CIA are like that, not just the analytics side.
Yeah.
But particularly them. They hire a lot of like people out of PhD programs. They literally have a system in place at the universities to spot them and try to recruit them.
Which is quite fascinating. There's people that feel a certain way about that. That is how John got recruited. It was at GW. It was a psychiatry professor or psychologist professor. Yeah. It was like straight out of a movie. He told the story in episode 249 when he was here, but it was like straight out of a movie where the guy goes, you're interesting. All right, take this number. You're going to show up at this building. And then he shows up at the building, knocks on a door. They take him up to a floor, knocks on another door. It's like inconspicuous. And then boom, suddenly it's like, oh, I'm in the lair. And you don't even know what you're getting into. But there's something, I don't know, when you hear these guys talk about it, there's something that's like, it's very seductive how they get recruited, because they're like, ooh, this is like a little club. No one's in. I could be in it, And then it worked out the way it worked out for him, I guess. But you were just telling me off air, you're working on a Palantir story. I love this. What do we got?
Yeah, it's a very important company for a number of reasons. One is that its stock is just stratospherically rising since the Trump administration in particular, but it's been doing well in general. And one reason for that is that AI is central to what they do. And a big part of a big protection of our civil liberties over the last several decades has been the fact that it's just not feasible for these national security agencies to actually go through all of these huge quantities of data that they collect. But now with artificial intelligence, that's no longer going to be true. They can have things that instantaneously go through the stuff that's collected. In addition to that, what my story is going to focus on is how Palantir is deployed in targeting, military targeting. So where before you would have had to have human, what's called targeting analysts saying, okay, this qualifies for blah, blah, blah. We can hit this, this, and this. Now they can do it close to instantaneously. And they have been. Gaza's kind of the big experiment zone for.
Seems like they're not doing a great job. They're just leveling the whole fucking place.
They can create these kill chains instantly, where before there would have been an entire system that would have had to take place.
It gets scary when you start talking about people in general, which obviously would include, women and children as like a target or something like that. And when I hear Alex Coverup, the CEO of Palantir, talk, look, I don't know the guy, but he doesn't talk in a way that makes it seem like he has a pulse.
I mean, the company's called Palantir.
Yeah.
I presume they read the novels, Lord of the Rings, which is in reference to. And if they did, they would know that those are not portrayed in a very good way in the book.
How'd you get into this latest story?
Palantir? Yeah. Just looking at their stock and being shocked at how... Yeah, but then also the intelligence community released its first strategy for AI recently. And so this is going to become the backbone of their approach to the, just flood of data that they've been drowning in, since the dawn of the information age. And for the first time, they'll be able to get their head above the water and make sense of it, which I think is worrying.
Yeah. I wonder how far ahead a lot of these things have been, and how much it's already affected us without us knowing, and like the game is far beyond what we even think. Because I've had enough people in here who are like around the situation to reasonably think that something like DARPA could be 30, 40 years ahead of us. So it's like, are we just watching the simulation that was designed 20 years ago just play out, and we don't even know we're a part of it?
Well, we don't know about the classified systems that get deployed, but I think that part of how science works is it depends so much on free association and openness that I think they definitely keep secrets, but it's hard to do so. That's why they create these things like special access programs to be able to hide technology. Yeah, it's this level of secrecy that's above top secret, really tightly guarded, and it's supposed to be used in particular for technology. And the reason they need this extraordinary system is because it's really hard to keep a secret. Scientists talk, the way that things get made, it's really hard to do that in the shadows. And so I would guess that things are ahead, but probably not so. Probably not as much as you might think. And that's why it's important that we do something about this AI thing. I mean, the way in which it's being deployed with almost no debate, in the case of the Department of Homeland Security, they have something called the AI Corps, just like the Peace Corps, going around finding applications of this for ICE, for Customs and Border Protection, for Coast Guard, so on and so forth.
They call it the Corps?
Yeah, they literally called the AI Corps. This was created several months ago, I think, or maybe last year during the Biden administration. And so they're revamping everything about the intelligence community right now, and you hardly hear any of it.
Joe, you got something up on this, actually? I see right here. What do we got?
Yeah.
DHS launches first of its kind initiative to hire 50 artificial intelligence experts in 2024. Today, Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas and Chief Information Officer and Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer Eric Heisen announced the department's first ever hiring sprint to recruit 50 artificial intelligence technology experts in 2024. The new DHS AI Corps, there it is modeled after the U.S. Digital Service, building teams that will help better leverage this new technology responsibly across strategic areas of the Homeland Security enterprise, including efforts to counter fentanyl, combat child sexual exploitation and abuse, deliver immigration services, secure travel, fortify and our critical infrastructure, and enhance our cybersecurity. Again, all that sounds great, but like, what is that going to slip to you being able to use? Are you going to see people saying something you don't like politically and be able to deploy drones and know everything about them and then use that against them?
Yeah, we don't know because they don't tell us what they're doing. I mean, it could be any number of good things, like you said, but you can imagine a lot of other applications for, in the case of Homeland Security, the child agencies include TSA, Customs and Border Protection, ICE, Coast Guard, Secret Service. I mean, all kinds of things that touch on Americans' day-to-day life. And we don't know what they're doing because they don't say.
Yeah.
And it's happening everywhere. Did you see recently the Pentagon I'm not making this up. I think they gave a AI executive from some big company, maybe it was Palantir itself. They made him a lieutenant colonel just by like hiring him. Can you pull this up? I can't remember the details of it, but it's one of the most crazy stories.
Just by hiring him.
Yeah, so that they could leverage whatever the knowledge base is to try to. This is like the biggest shift that's happening right now. And
yes, the U.S. Army recently commissioned 4 prominent AI execs into the rank of a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve. This happened around June 2025. The executives are Shyam Sankar, Andrew Bosworth.
Look at that. Palantir, Meta, OpenAI.
Oh
I mean,
God.
these
Kevin
are the same
Weil.
people that you saw during Trump's. We were just talking about this off screen. During Trump's inauguration, all of these tech
Right behind
CEOs, it looked like they were inaugurating the president. And that is like the perfect symbol of exactly what's happening. The intelligence community just recently put out a strategy for prioritizing coordination with private corporations, and they've described in their strategy documents how corporations are these tech companies are basically the new nation state. They're as powerful as nation states now, and so they're increasingly farming out a lot of their responsibilities to these companies. So for people that care about civil liberties, that care about freedom, opposing what the government does is going to look a lot different in the 21st century than it did in the 20th century, because so much of this is carried out by these private actors.
I remember the first time Andy Bustamante sat in with me, he simplified something for me that, there's things he says I totally disagree with, but then there's some stuff he says about how the world is viewed that it's like, oh my God, how did I never, duh. And one of those things is he's like, the only thing that matters is GDP. What is your output? That's where the power is. It's what runs the world. So when you look at these companies, I forget offhand what it was. Maybe we can Google it, Joe. But like Apple,
Oh,
for
pull up. I did a
example,
story making exactly the point you're making,
Right?
and I just listed GDPs of nations with companies,
With
and it's
companies
really
in there.
striking. Yeah, let me see. I think the story is, what is it? Type in Ken Klippenstein. GDP. Yeah, that's the story.
This is it. Big Brother becomes
there
Little
should be
Brother.
a picture somewhere in there.
You got some good titles, bro. You got some good.
So
copy
there's
on
the
that.
so this was an intelligence community directive that they put out at the beginning of the year, describing how the intelligence community has to work with, quote, non-state entities. That's kind of code for corporations. And it talks about, it's really interesting. They say that they can actually take risks that can result in embarrassment and like in pursuit of this goal. Like it's really unusual language that you don't typically see.
And then you had a ranking list down here too, right?
Let's see
that. This is
Okay, here it is.
Yeah, you're making my point for
Yep.
me perfectly. Here we go. Top 10 U.S. corporations by market cap. Top 10 countries by GDP. So 1 and 1 we got.
Other than the superpowers, it's like
It's
completely
very close.
comparable. Yeah.
So Apple at 3.8 trillion would be 5th in the world, behind Germany and ahead of India, which has how many billion? Like 1 point something billion people
Right.
living there.
Yeah.
That is fucking nuts.
So this is the new nation state. And this is only just, if you look at their value, this is a new phenomenon, Like corporations have been powerful, but not this powerful.
And look, I mean, you got to say it too. Like, you got Tesla there at number 7, 1.3 trillion. And I'm not even blaming Elon for this, but just unfortunately, we live in a world where how things look matters. That's just the truth. And when you got a guy who's like the richest dude in the country, who's in charge of the 7th biggest U.S. corporation by market cap, there's always going to be something undercutting whatever good work he may want to do, however you define that, because of who he is. And now we have, and it's not, let's not single him out. We have a lot of people at these different companies that you just pointed out who like take on these roles, and it's like, well, what do they really want? What are they getting? What is Sam Altman getting out of setting up like an AI program with the United States government?
Totally. And in the case of Tesla, I mean, so people think of the cars, but I talked to somebody at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence who was telling me, I asked them, I said, what does this mean, this phrase, non-state entity? And, they basically explained to me that it was, in many cases, code for a big corporation. I said, so what would an example be of where you want a corporation? The example that I was given was Starlink in Ukraine. The U.S. government was like, these guys are better than what we have. Please help us. And so the government is kind of supplicating itself before these, mega billionaires, asking them to do things. One of the first sources I had in the intelligence world, it was an FBI agent who I was asking like, I wanted to know, what can you guys do kind of thing. He says, who we're really jealous of? It's not what we can do. It's what Google can do. We would love to be able to have what they have. And that totally changed. You were saying before, what were some moments that gave you a sense of how this stuff really works? That was one big one, was how powerful and how incisive the information that corporations have is. This is not what the 1950s looked like at all. It's a complete shift.
No, it's not. I mean, we all know the famous Eisenhower tweet about the military-industrial complex, which is a different type that now still relates to today. But this is like that on steroids because it involves our footprints everywhere. Like people, myself, all of us, everyone listening, every time we take out our phone and we click something, we are giving away information, whether we like it or not.
And the intelligence community can buy that on the open market.
Open market.
That's what I was saying before. They have their first ever open source intelligence strategy. Part of that is to be able to access what's called commercially, I can't remember commercial information. And so basically they have these data brokers that sell all of this stuff. There's essentially no oversight, very little in the way of laws to protect against it. So not only is the U.S. government buying it, all these foreign governments are buying it too, and there's nothing to prevent that.
And they're incentivized to the shareholders.
Yeah.
To sell
this is the business model. This
Yes.
isn't like a kind of minor thing.
Yeah.
Information is the backbone of the entire, like a huge part of the Silicon Valley.
I think about this often because, like, the system is set up to turn in on itself, right? So there's a beauty to free markets and capitalism. I would argue it's the best system of all of them. It doesn't mean it's perfect. And one of the downsides is, especially with public companies, which are going to be the largest, is they got to report shit every 3 months. So the top 5 people there better make something work or crunch some numbers or figure out how to get business through the door so that they don't lose their job because there's nowhere to go except be fired. And then that mentality is top down to the entire company and the rank and file. And so we look at things and we will just call something evil that's being done, and maybe the act itself is, but the incentive structure has been set up in a way that people who, I mean, sometimes people actually are evil, by the way, but like most of the time it's like, no, it's the incentive structure has set up people to make decisions that they don't realize have insane reverberating effects on all of us.
Yeah, it's a really important point. And it's like I was saying about the media before. I distinguish between media as institutions and then the individuals within them, because very often a lot of my critiques that I was making about media earlier, over a few drinks, you talk to people and they basically agree with you. A lot of people in these institutions, they just either feel powerless to do anything about it, or in some cases they're just not aware because these are such sprawling, in the case of government agencies, in the case of companies or corporations, I mean, they become bigger than the sum of their parts. And it's kind of like we're living under this colossus that is so big, it's hard to even grok what it is that they're doing, much less be able to respond to it and reform it and make sure that there's some kind of sane oversight in place.
Well, we were talking about the turnstile going out to defense companies was the example I was using 15 minutes ago. But like, let's be honest here, that turnstile exists probably even heavier to companies like this. You know, guys can leave the government where they're making $106,000 a year, and with all the information they have after a 15-year career there, go right over to Google. And now on top of that, they also have their old buddies at their old job who want to contact them about things and take care of a little something. And it creates this unholy alliance that, I mean, we've seen this play out. You've reported on it too, you know, with even censorship concerns and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. In the case of the social media companies communicating with government about material that they consider to be disinformation, I mean, they formalized it to the point that they have like automated systems in place to respond to certain things. I remember
AI systems?
I don't know if it's AI, but it must be, because just to give you an example, when I did the story on the Vance Dossier, that was taken down by Facebook, Instagram, Meta, and it was all instantaneous. It was like there couldn't have been any time. So it's like there's something in place where I actually talked to somebody about this. They have some kind of a kill switch in place for certain kinds of, you know, if it's deemed like national security or whatever. They did end up reinstating it after a day or two, but they took all of it down. And, you know, to some extent, we're living in the shadow of 2016, and these companies are like, well, we don't want to get dragged in front of Congress again and yelled at. So
That's right.
They've adopted, and that's part of the problem with yelling at them is like, you know, they're going to respond and say, okay, well, I don't want to deal with this stuff. Like, let's just defer to whatever the government wants.
I wonder if some of that is like, if some of that is also like the human makeup for the Hunter Biden stuff, where they're like, well, we fucked
totally.
that one up. So this Ken guy's reporting something on the same people, so let's just under the rug.
I think so, yeah.
And it wasn't even bad. Like we already laid it out earlier. It wasn't even like it was like bad, but maybe it could have been construed as bad.
Right. Totally. I mean, everything they're doing is in the you know, they have a saying, generals always fight the last war. Mm-hmm. So they're thinking, what was the last crisis and how do we prevent the last one from happening again this time, even if it's different?
Yeah, you're making a great point here. I've talked to so many people who make this, who I feel like are in good positions to speak on this kind of stuff, who make this point to me where they're like, dude, everyone always talks about, you know, the politics of some of these places and stuff like that. Not saying that doesn't exist. Yes, there's certainly pieces of that. But at the end of the day, the guys at the top are businessmen and women, right? And so they got to make decisions for the business. And to your point, none of them want to be dragged in front of Congress on November 10th, insert year here, by the party that lost, to be grilled about why it's their fault that the other party won. And so they're going to do whatever they can in CYA society, cover your ass, to make sure that that doesn't happen. And what's inevitably going to happen in that case, as we have seen play out in all of the last 3 elections at the very least, is some sort of mistake pertaining to free speech being interrupted and actual things that then, whether it's your dossier, whether it's Hunter Biden thing, whether it's WikiLeaks, whatever it is, something that actually perhaps affects the outcome of an election.
Totally. And that's not always weighed because it's just all this hysterical coverage about, oh, they didn't take this down, they didn't take that down. It's like, well, consider the counterfactual that they're proactively going out and taking all these things down. Isn't there concern that they do the wrong thing? And clearly we see that they have done so.
Yeah. Strange times, man. It's crazy that we're only, like 7-8 months into the second term? It's
yeah.
like, Jesus Christ. Do you think
to think about that the end of a president's administration is when they really push forward the legacy making stuff? Like, ooh, what do we have to look forward to here?
Especially when there's no election that he's got to win. You know, do you think we're gonna see some return to the normal corrupt way of doing business?
No.
In 28, you don't.
No, I think Mamdani blew that up. I mean, if there was any question about it. I mean, you know, I always compare it to physics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. That discontent is still going to be there, even if Trump is not. And it's going to inhabit another body. It'll find someone else to represent it, I think. Because it's not going to just, unless the grievances are addressed, which I think I'm safe to assume the elites will not do that, they will remain and they will take another form.
Now, Mamdani's he is a canary in the coal mine for sure. I agree with you. I think that's a great point. It's a big job, but it's still mayor in New York. It's not like he was running for Senate or president or something like that. Do you think that part of the culture change mantle moving forward is going to be the injection of, I don't know, some sort of celebrity type people gravitating towards like those top roles, and that's who we're choosing from because these are the people that have eyeballs online?
I don't think we can predict it any more than I could have predicted that Trump was going to become president in 2016. And I was someone who thought he would win. But
how early did you think that?
Only the year of, because I didn't really think of the guy much. I just thought of him as like, oh yeah, that's the guy from The Apprentice or whatever. You know, like he had given indications of political, ambitions, but I never could have predicted that. And so my honest guess is that the Democratic nominee, I bet we don't know who it is right now. I bet we couldn't guess if I was given like 10 names. I bet you it might be someone like Stephen Smith, who talks about politics, isn't from the system, but comments on it and inhabits this sort of, position that roughly Trump did in 2015, where he's angry and talks about things, but is kind of seen as, basically, I don't laugh stuff off like media seems happy to do.
Yeah.
Where they'll go, Stephen Smith, pff. You've seen some of this polling, right? I mean, he polls above like, some of the top Democrats. That's not to say that he would win, but I'm saying that there's clearly interest in an outsider at this point, which by definition means that we won't know the person's name, at least in a political context.
First they laugh, then they yell, then they drink.
Exactly.
We've seen it over and over again. They're gonna find a way to make the same mistakes, and whether it's with him or someone else, it does feel like the way our world works now. Everything is about attention and influence, and there is a facade that's now down of like the politicians. The politicians that get attention now are the ones that at least try to play the game like a Trump plays, be ridiculous on social media, get into fucking Twitter wars with this guy or that guy.
Do you see Gavin Newsom? He had a post that sounded just like Trump.
He did?
It's like they're picking up on this thing.
Pull it up.
Just yesterday, I think. It was like in all caps, and it was like very unlike Gavin Newsom.
Honestly,
people were laughing about it.
He is so Gavin Newsom is the most shameless motherfucker of all time. I halfway
Hey,
respect
you gotta
it, man.
watch yourself. He might come on the show.
Yeah.
I could see him asking you.
Yeah, I've had a firm no politicians rule, and I've adhered
That's a
to
good
it
rule.
for 330 some episodes. So I think we'll keep it that way for a while. You got something, Joe?
Is it
It's like some all caps thing. Yep, there it is.
Donald Trump, if you do not stand down, we will be forced to lead an effort to redraw maps in California to offset the rigging of maps in red states. But if the other states call off their redistricting efforts, we will do the same. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
So this is our future. Wait, to answer your question, when Trump leaves office, everyone else will just become Trump.
Yeah. Did you see the behind the scenes video that shows how he does this?
Trump?
Yeah.
I've read about how apparently he has he workshops ideas with people and they type them up or something, right? Yeah.
So there's
I didn't know there's a
what
video.
the fuck was it called? His campaign did like a 6-part behind the scenes thing at the tail end, like around from the assassination time last year until the end. Can you search Trump tweeting documentary? And there's like a scene that shows it. And he's just like sitting there while they're doing some sort of like Democratic debate or something like that. And he's like, Obama doesn't know. And there's just some girl like typing away anything, period. He did nothing for this country. It's just fucking, I'm sure a lot of people out there have seen it, but
I haven't seen this.
it's and then like you have like Tulsi Gabbard sitting in the room and she like goes, "Ooh, add in this part." And he's like, "Oh, that's good. Yeah, add that." And it's like, this is not good.
It's like the writer's room in like a comedy show.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, this is like the writer's room, but we're dealing with the consequences. Oh my god, it's hard. You gotta laugh.
And the thing is, and people like it more than the Democrats, which is like a ChatGPT.
Yes.
Those are your choices: the writer's room or ChatGPT.
Or ChatGPT. Oh, it's so funny. Yeah, I think that was it, Joe. I think you had it. That was it. Yes, this is it. Yeah. Can we pull this up?
Yeah.
Behind the scenes glimpse on how Trump posted on social media during Harris DNC speech. That's what it was. Here we go. Do we have volume?
Oh, sorry about that.
You good?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my God. Is she crazy?
Thank you so very much. Thank you, everyone.
It's like a bad SNL skit.
Thank
Oh,
you.
too many thank yous. That must be 35.
Traveling from India
That's
to
good.
California with an unshakable dream to be the
Just type it away.
scientist
How many people are watching?
at home.
Can we tell how many, Dan? How many people are watching?
She's talking about how great San Francisco was before she destroyed it. A lot. Inflation and crime.
He's not proposing a single policy, not one policy proposal. Ours is biography, won't lower your prices at the grocery store.
Or at the pub.
But they're putting veterans out on the streets.
33,000 homeless veterans. Gotcha. Okay, say these the things of which she complains. The things of which she
In many
This
ways,
is how he does it.
Wow.
Donald Trump is an unserious man.
Oh.
You know that?
Consequences.
It's great, right? Ready? These prosecutions were all started by her and Biden against their political opponents. Me. Get that out right away.
Get that out right away. All right, that's good.
Oh,
You get the
lying
idea, though.
against.
They're just
Wow.
working material.
So they just want to feed like directly into his brain now, and there's no mediated, you know.
Maybe Elon Neuralinked him in the first 6 months or something, so he can just be like, Neuralink, send it out.
No, this goes to your point about social media and people wanting stuff. You know, everything is mediated now. Yeah. There's no private life anymore. Mm-hmm. It's like it's like the streamer president, basically, right?
That's exactly right. That's where the culture is now. You know, people just want to like sit there and have updates all the time on things that technically on a minute to minute aren't affecting the most important things in their life, but it's the pure Truman Show entertainment of it.
I feel that in my job. I mean, you're under pressure to produce stuff like every day and say something about everything that happens. And sometimes this is something our editor's been really good on. Is just like, well, if you don't have something to say, let's not say something. But that's not rewarded. The opposite is rewarded.
I'm not jealous of where you have to sit on that, because in what you do, you have to be reporting on stories all the time, which means you have to be putting out information, which means also to get eyeballs on that, you have to be actively going through things on Twitter. It doesn't mean you have to be ridiculous or anything like that, but like you're required to be active all the time on there, whereas like my rule of thumb is 99.99% of the tweets I type out, people never see. It doesn't even go to drafts. It goes 5, 4, 3, delete.
No, I like them because I like your tweets because there's such a like palate cleanse from everything else. It's just
mine?
Like, yeah.
The ones that make it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like so unlike all the other stuff that I follow.
But I'm not required to give my thought. Like
No, that's what's refreshing about it. You clearly don't give a shit about like everyone else is like carefully packaging it to be blah blah blah.
No, I'm just like, you know, if I'm feeling like Ben Franklin's that gangster,
yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, I mean, what do you make of the Trump Elon breakup? I mean, that still is pretty fresh. Can't say I was surprised at all, but shit got a little reality TV there for a minute, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it reminds me of when he had Trump had Zelensky in the White House, and he goes, wasn't it? That was great television, wasn't it?
Unbelievable
it's just like
television.
Unreal. Yeah. So I don't know. It was kind of the breakup that we all expected was going to happen, right? Like two volatile personalities. But I wrote a story on this, wondering, you know, who will end up on top. And my prediction was not Trump, is that'll be Elon, for the reasons that we were describing before, how powerful these corporations are becoming. And you're seeing him now reorient and talk about how he's going to fund Democratic candidates, and it's going to completely change the equation in the next election. And so I'm very curious to see if I'm correct. But these didn't used to be questions even just 20 years ago, like, oh, what is the CEO going to do? And we've all just adapted to this new reality, which is strange. Should someone have that much power? These questions haven't even been asked, much less, you know, debated.
What do you think, Elon Musk? Do you think he's trying to do things actually for the right reason, or do you think it's a wolf in sheep's clothing?
Well, nobody does things for one reason. There's always a variety. One of them is money, power. You know, another might be power. Another might be interest in technology. So I see him as a mixed figure. He reminds me a lot of Trump in a number of ways. Maybe a younger version of Trump, in the sense that there's a lot that I don't like about him, but I can understand why people. When he says stuff like "go to Mars," I can see why that appeals to people, because it's this kind of like thinking big that you just don't see. Yes. And in politics, so much of is like, oh, we're gonna have a 2% rebate on this thing, and it's just all piecemeal. And then to have someone come in like Trump and do stuff that a lot of stuff that I personally don't agree with, but like it's very clear what it is, and it's thinking big about, again, stuff that I don't necessarily agree with, but it's thinking big and clear in bold-faced letters, you know? Yeah. And so I think that's his appeal. And when it's a response to this weaselly, like we were talking about before, politicians that don't want to answer the question about Israel or whatever it is, and they just punch through the wall and are just like, love it or leave it. It's like, I can understand why that appeals to a certain type of person, because you don't just look at him. You have to look at what is this happening in the context of.
That's right.
Because it's not just Trump; it's what is Trump a response to, and it's not until you look at that context that you understand why they are what they are. And in Elon's case, it's like, how did he make all this money? From what I've read about him, he would look at for SpaceX, for example, he would look at the production of the rockets and say, oh, why do we need this? They'd be like, oh, I guess we don't. Like, rip that out, get rid of that. And it's like, so like you had these incumbent companies like Lockheed Martin that had an easy way, and they didn't really care if you had all this extra stuff because we're going to get the contract anyways. So, I mean, that's just a sitting duck for someone like Musk to come in and shake things up, and that's basically what Trump did. So I see them similar in that way.
Do you think, I'll come back to Elon in a second, but do you think that DOGE, even though it, I guess, like ended at the end there and then there was this breakup, do you think that some of that worked and actually left a mark, or it's more symbolic than anything and just points out the obvious in the room, which is that we have a problem?
No, it seems symbolic, and I think Musk himself has said that it wasn't. I think he's reflected on it and said that it wasn't effective, or I think he's complained that he was undercut. And to the extent that Trump allowed to happen, it seems like it was sort of like this, hey, look at all this waste. But then you look at the Pentagon budget, it's going to be $1 trillion. Right. It's the biggest one we've ever had. So it's like, well, how does that fit? It doesn't. But so, it seems like Trump sort of let it go on as a sort of theatrical demonstration of, oh, look how much we're doing about costs. But
sure.
Even Musk himself seems pretty negative about it at this point.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that is also tied to like the bad taste in his mouth with how things ended versus like what they were actually able to do. But it does feel like even one of the most powerful guys in the country who helped fund, the guy who won office, you're going up against such a big machine with so many tentacles, you don't even know where the tentacles are. Like, cynically, I don't know how he even finds some of these things when, we don't even know what the budget is. It's a black budget for a reason. It's like, it could be 35 trillion, could be 10 trillion. Who the fuck knows?
Well, forget about classified. I mean, obviously that's a problem. We don't even know the unclassified expenditures. I mean, you can look at legislation and see that it says this and that, but in any sort of itemized way to see, like, what does it mean? It's really hard to find that stuff out. I mean, as a reporter, I have to look at, there's Inspector General reports, there's the Government Accountability Office, there's different things that you can find, bits and pieces. But even just as an example, another learning experience I had as a reporter was calling somebody and saying, hey, this office, what's that about? They're like, I didn't even know that office existed, from somebody who works in an adjacent office. So I can't stress enough how much people don't even realize what's in there. And there's no such thing as a government. Just, there should be something that says, here are the agencies and here's a flow chart. I mean, they do have that for like the top line stuff.
A directory.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't have it for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what FOIA is. This stuff, I mean, there's two approaches. One is you have to go and request it and hope that they send it to you. Another one is that they would proactively release it. It's crazy that they don't proactively release a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just gets it gets weird when you think about also where people sit and how, like we talked about semantics earlier, the whole USAID thing. It's like you can dress something up as this part of the government, but in reality, it's, there's like, I don't know what it's called, but like, when people can put the hands in the machine and move around like that, there's hands going in the machine and it's from another part of the government, but it's not tied. You can't find that in a directory, to your point. So if there's something good to come out of it, maybe we at least have confirmation that is the way things work. So now people can be suspicious of, certain organizations within government that claim to be doing this. And it's like, are you really doing that? Probably not.
Yeah, USAID is a good example of that. Because, to the extent that it does things that help people, which I'm sure that it does, that's good. But how much do we know about this thing? And, so much of it is opaque. And to the extent that I've read oversight reports on it, a lot of money is spent on administrative costs. And, of course, it's about the advancement of U.S. Geopolitical aims, which isn't necessarily bad. But that's different in character than, just helping people.
Right.
And so, I think there's this effort to try to say, oh, you're against helping people. And it's like, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So to the extent that you involve people in it to get them to question things, I think that's good.
Yeah.
And rather than just have this all be decisions that are made in Washington that is never really discussed.
Elon also came in at a time where people were extremely came into the political process, I should say, at a time where people were very concerned about free speech and things that were happening on platforms. And I believe when he was literally like taking over Twitter, that's when you were reporting on some of the stuff with Homeland Security. That was the one with Li Fang you were doing, right, back then? So what did you guys find there that Homeland Security was trying to do vis-a-vis some of these companies to like censor disinformation?
Yeah, so they had kind of modes of communication set up. Subsequently, I found out even gaming companies do with a lot of these national security entities in which they could communicate with them about threats of foreign influence operations. And the thing is, it kept growing. It was like sprawling. At first, it's something narrow like, Russian disinformation, maybe Ukraine. And then it starts to spread to health disinformation around COVID. And it was kind of like, well, first of all, they're not really talking about it. Second of all, what are going to be the guardrails in place? Like at what point, like there's an endless amount of like falsehoods if that's what you're looking at. I mean, I don't understand. I don't like the word disinformation because it's kind of like, it's sort of a paranoid word. It assumes that somebody's spreading something that's false on purpose. I think we all know people that just believe wrong things because they just believe wrong things. Right. You don't have to assume that they're trying to operate some deception or something. But so that was kind of the focus of it. And then once we reported on it, it was kind of crazy because it was like Department of Homeland Security is doing it, FBI is doing it, DOD has its own thing. And so it's like this huge thing that they're popping up like daisies everywhere. They created something called the Foreign Malign Influence Center.
Foreign Malign Influence Center.
Yeah, and that was in 2024, I think, where it was created at the level of the Office of Director of National Intelligence. So this was like a really senior level position as opposed to like the lower level efforts that had been going on before. And I started reading about it. I was like, what is the point of this? And it hadn't been reported. I think, I was the first to report it. And I say that because I'm sort of sad that it's like something that important didn't get any coverage because not only is it another agency, it turns out they had created so many of these counter disinformation agencies that they needed the Foreign Malign Influence Center to coordinate with all of them because it was getting to be such a mess with all of the different agencies doing duplicative and overlapping things. So that gives you a sense of the breadth of what was happening. And again, prior to my story, there had not been a single thing written about this intelligence community entity that, I mean, God knows how much money was spent on it, but also to the point, just this massive machine that had been developed.
Sounds like they read 1984. They just took the wrong takeaway right there. Well, I mean, the thing that people have to accept, and it sucks, and we said this, I mean, at least I know a lot of people who were saying this. I was saying this a few years ago when he went to take over. It's like free speech is painful. You're going to get some bad shit. I mean, you and I can both open up Twitter every day and be like, woo, this is...
it's ugly, yeah.
It's very ugly.
Freedom comes at a price.
But exactly. The alternative is historically worse every time.
Totally.
And I always have to remind myself of that because sometimes I'm like, can't they just...
No, I get it.
I'm like,
I feel that
can't do that. You got to let them... that they're crazy. You got to let good speech win.
Yep.
And that's the world we're living in. But it's helpful when guys like you are also finding some of these things and bringing it to the people to be like, yo, this is a real concern and here's how they're doing it and you should know about it. And it gives us all an understanding of what's happening out there. So I appreciate your work in kind of getting that out to the people. Also doing it from a position like you were at The Intercept at the time, but now you have your own Substack and you're back completely on your own, just reporting on everything. And it's great stuff. So people should go hit the link in description.
Thanks, man. Yes, they should. I second that.
But Ken, we're going to have to do this again sometime, man. I really enjoyed this conversation.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
All right. Everyone join Ken's Substack if you want all the information on all the stories that he gave today. And, I mean, like I said, you're covering literally everything there. So you'll get your full news fix as well from another great independent perspective.
Thanks, man.
All right. Everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace. Thank you guys for watching the episode. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. They're both a huge, huge help. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below.